All right, it's recording. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Today is November 20th, 2023. This is the GBOS regular meeting. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors operates under the Girdwood Public Meeting Standards of Conduct. Oh, I'll start with the sentence above that. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors, its committees and subcommittees are subject to the Alaska Open Meetings Act as found in Alaska Statute 44.62.310 and Anchorage Municipal Code 1.25 Public Meetings. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors operates under the Girdwood Public Meetings Standards of Conduct. I'll call this meeting to order at 7:01. I'm Brianna Sullivan, co-chair and fire department supervisor. Also in the room,
Jennifer Wingard, co-chair and land use supervisor.
Guy Wade, Parks and Rec cemetery supervisor.
and online.
Amanda Sassy, roads and public safety supervisor.
Thank you. And Mike, I think, is almost here, so we'll announce his attendance when he arrives. I'll do the land acknowledgement. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors acknowledges the Indigenous peoples of Alaska whose land we reside on. The community of Girdwood, situated between the areas known to be Dena'ina and Alukdik homeland, respects the people who are stewards of this land for generations. We commit to the continued stewardship of this land and are grateful to be a part of a wider community that seeks to maintain a sustainable use of Girdwood Valley for present and future peoples. Now there's roll call and any disclosures this evening. Seeing and hearing none. I would entertain a motion to approve the November 20th meeting. Also, I'll just pause for one moment since Mike is here. Mike, go ahead for your attendance.
Yep, Mike Etherington, housing and economic development supervisor.
Thank you. Any disclosures, Mike? Okay, we're on to the agenda revision and approval. Anyone have any revisions to tonight's agenda?
I move to approve the agenda, but I do have a suggested change.
Okay,
I'll second.
second, and on to your amendment then,
Sure.
Mike?
It'll be adding an item under old business. It's the issue of what's the easiest way to put it? I guess the use of parking lot, the park and ride parking lot for as temporary accommodation.
Okay,
RVs and campings.
What is it?
The park and ride lot. Status of next to look.
we have an amendment. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jennifer. Any,
So that's 12.
it would be number 12. Yes.
I'll call 11.
That would be
Action on
new business, I believe. Sorry.
that? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 17. Thanks, Kyle, for you.
Yep.
Any oppositions to,
Just, sorry.
go ahead.
Want to question, Mike, I don't see discussing the STR thing on here anymore.
Actually, that's true. It's not on.
And that would have been, we did bring it up at the last meeting, so that would be old business if we're willing.
I think we should have it on. Propose that change as well.
All right, I will second that.
Should we treat those as separate amendments or vote on them together or all at once?
Mike could amend his motion if you want to put them together.
I'll put them together.
Okay.
Just one of them.
I'll second.
Oh, great, great. Any oppositions to the amendment? Hearing and seeing none, the amended agenda is approved and back to the main agenda. Any objections to that? Okay, agenda is approved with a number 12 on STR and number 17. I would entertain a motion to approve October 16th meeting minutes, October 23rd meeting minutes, and nonprofit grants minutes. And November 13th, if anyone wants to do it all.
I'll do it all. Oh, sorry.
I'll second.
Okay, fine.
Okay, first by Jennifer and seconded by Mike. Any oppositions? Okay, all those meeting minutes are approved. Thank you, everyone, and Margaret for keeping those. Announcements. The public is encouraged to ask questions and provide comment. Please raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged. To help discussion stay productive, please direct your comments to the board rather than other members of the public and keep your comments focused on the business under discussion. Please be respectful of everyone's opinions. GBOS seats A and B terms end in 2024 and will be on the April GVSA ballot. Filing at the municipal clerk's office is between January 12th and January 16th, 2024. More information is available at the agenda link provided.
It was 26, January 26th,
Yes,
not 16.
January 12th and January 26th. Thank you, Guy. I'll go to introductions, presentations, and reports. Number 1, do we have DOT regarding Glacier Creek bank erosion? Sean Holland, DOT Central Region Director, is here on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Sean Holiday. This is my, is this a good spot to spin?
Maybe just one seat
Hey,
for
I'm here. All right, I'll be right by the mic.
that little disc, so
Also,
online.
I've also got Shannon McCarthy here with me, who's the communications director. Mhm. And so this is my, I'm just starting my 3rd official week as the regional director at DOT. I was previously at the DOT for 18-ish years, but I've been working somewhere else for 3 years. And yeah, I feel lucky to get the opportunity to come back and work as the central region director. And so far it's been fun, 2 weeks, but the Glacier Creek bridge erosion, I can talk about that a little bit. And then I kind of got an update on some of the other projects that we have going on in the area, and I can tell you what I know. But the Glacier Creek erosion, I was telling Kyle that sometime around July, my wife was walking to the park and took a video of that, and she said, "Is this supposed to look like that?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." So that erosion's been occurring for about 1.5 years, and it definitely accelerated this summer. And I think that's kind of raised everybody's concern there. And but we do track that. We measure it, I'd say average bi-weekly. And the channel has moved away from the bridge. So near term, the concern is smaller than it was in July, probably. But I did get together with a group that's working on it. And, there's 2 considerations in my mind. It's a risk management. What is the risk of that bridge abutment being eroded and undermined? There's also, you guys know all this anyway, but there's a AWU facility there that, again, creates redundant water supply for up the hill. And there's some risk that erosion could take that out as well. So impossible question, but I kind of asked my folks so tell me, does a 100-year storm or a 1% storm, does that make you nervous? Does a 50-year storm make you nervous, or does a 20-year storm make you nervous? And the answer was a 20-year storm would make them nervous. So, there's a 5% chance roughly that's going to happen every year, which seems small, other than I don't think our 20-year storms are 20-year storms anymore. They occur more frequently. So, and then what happens during breakup is another question. So, whether it's rain on snow or whatever, we could get an event that would put that at a higher level of risk, but then we don't really know at this point what's going to happen at breakup. So anyway, there's a risk factor there. And secondly, it's a comfort factor. Like I said, made my wife nervous, and made you folks nervous. Obviously, you wouldn't put the resolution together. So there's some value in kind of covering that concern there. It's not a huge project. It's about 80 feet long, and there's about 1,000 yards of riprap. And even with building that access down there, the work itself is going to take less than a month to do the whole project. It's probably not the best time of year to do it because, we have to do some tree clearing. We already have snow, but it's not like it can't be done. The access is, again, on a scale, it's relative scale. It's relatively difficult. There's a steep slope there. I'm not sure if we'd go across, fill the ditch in temporarily, but we have to access it across the pathway. We might be able to drive down the path, but we could figure all that out. So anyway, the direction that I guess I'll send my people in is that we're going to start monitoring that weekly, just to make sure that it's not that channel hasn't changed and that risk level rises. And I've tasked those guys with kind of taking a look at, is there an interim phase that we can build I want to make sure it's efficient. And if we do it in 2 phases, it's going to be less efficient. But we could manage our risk if we made that access and brought some rock in. But then you look at, well, it's not a huge project to begin with, so is it better off just to do the whole thing? So I've kind of asked those guys, like, what's the difference? What's the difference in the permitting? What's the difference? The funding, we could find the funding to get something built sooner, but would it be easier to pay for half of it now, half of it later? And how quick could we do something? The full project, they think between the permitting and the contracting, we could probably do it in the March timeframe, which again, I think is, it's before breakup. So that's probably doable. If we go with a partial fix, that's the question that I posed to them. How quick can we pull the design together? It may be a different type of permitting. It may be able to come together quicker. But then, of course, if we get that 20-year event or whatever, it turns into emergency, and then all that kind of changes. We do have all the rock that we need is available up at McHugh that kind of came out of that rockfall mitigation project that we've had. So we do have it all ready to go and all ready to come down. So anyway, I think there's a little bit of follow-up that we have to do for you guys, but recognize that it's a concern for, like I said, both risk factor and a comfort factor. So yeah, so I could probably keep you posted and let you know when I get some answers to those questions and let you know how quick we can get something in place.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Are there any questions for now on that on the board? Okay.
One question. So I wasn't clear how, it sounded like the mark timescale to do the project completely is probably feasible.
Mhm.
There may be some other options. When would you be making a decision on whether to execute this by March or sooner but less?
I'd say next couple of weeks, probably. I'm optimistic on my timelines always, but no, I don't. It's like I say, it's not a big project, and I don't think there's a whole lot to think about there. So I think 2 weeks is reasonable. That decision. How does that timeline make you feel? If we were going to wait till March to build the whole thing, does that make you nervous?
A little bit nervous, but I think that the bigger risk is, I think we're sort of towards the end of the first risk phase, which is fall, and it's another risk around middle of spring. So March is probably okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be more worried if you were saying June.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Guy?
That rock in the Q Creek, will you bring it? Is it small enough project to truck it down, or you have to put it on a train and transfer it off?
We'd probably leave it up to the contractor, but I'm guessing it's going to come down in trucks. And it's probably going to come down in small trucks so that they can dump it once. If they bring it down in trailers, they're going to have to dump it somewhere else, put it in a smaller truck, and then haul it to the where they're going to place it. So in my mind, it's going to come down in rear dump trucks.
And another question on measure, when you say measure it, are you, like looking at discharge and, looking at FOAG and trying to figure out what kind of measurements, or is it just kind of visual stage height?
Much simpler than that. They take a picture from the same spot and have one guy hold a rod from the same spot so they can measure the erosion and kind of where the channel is and take a photo and compare it to the last week.
Okay, just comparison.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jennifer?
That was really informative. Thank you. But just real quickly, when you talk about the trees, I assume that's got to be on the east, what is that, the northeast side of the bridge? The trees.
Yeah. I think they probably have to get down there and build a little pad to be able to access the bottom. You build it from the bottom up. So you're going to have a pad built down there so you can get equipment down there and then to be able to get the rock down so that you can place it. And, it did blow out. There was erosion control there in former riprap rock that had been there for as long as the bridge, as far as I know, and that did wash all that away. So that new design, again, we don't see the same level of events that we used to see, but the design is going to have kind of a similar size rock underneath it, and then with a larger rock on top. So it's designed for a higher flow.
Thank you. And just follow up, we look forward to that update maybe at our next meeting.
Sure.
And after you have, it is made. if your decision is made in the next 2 weeks. It looks like we have a question online. Brett, go ahead.
Thank you. And then quickly, Sean, we're doing some subcommittee work here on potential, infill in Girdwood using, say, Glacier Creek as an option. A quick question, as we evaluate this, do you think that we should be evaluating above the bridge for potential mitigation of this? I mean, if some of that material would come out of Glacier Creek above the highway bridge, would we sort of alleviate some of this channel shifting as it erodes towards the bridge abutments? If that would be beneficial or not?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to it, Brett. I think our guys could probably take a look at a recent drone aerial footage or something like that and see if there's any benefit to that. Because that channel is obviously moving around. I don't know. It's kind of hard to direct it unless you build that, armor it with a rock or something like that. But then also when you armor it, it causes it to bounce off. So luckily we have guys that are smarter than me trying to figure out that problem. But no, that's not a bad suggestion though. Maybe I should. They may have done that already. I'm not sure.
Can I just reserve to contact you offline on this as we look to a feasibility study of doing this? It might be beneficial to all of us.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Anything else? Okay.
Get some updates on other projects too.
Yeah. If I got enough time, I'll make it quick. So I just do I have enough time? Okay. Yeah. So I started at 75 to 90. The project is we're getting pretty close. It's complete from placer overflow all the way to the wildlife center, top lift pavement, final striping, everything. Bridge work, we're about 95% complete. Throughout the winter, we're going to work on installing bridge rail and guardrail, and that should be completed by the end of the year. So really by the end of the year, at least for the winter, we should be off the highway. We still have some bridge demo to do, and I think he said that was at Placer, but I really haven't even noticed since driving by there. We're all in the new alignment, so that shouldn't affect traffic at all. Next year, we still have to put top lift pavement from the wildlife center up to the north part of the project and restripe that. And I think for the winter, they temp striped it as 2 lanes. Next year, it will be 3 lanes with a passing lane in there. That work should be complete by July, but it's not going to look like we're complete because we're bidding a phase 3 of that project maybe next month, but over the winter at some point. Phase 3 is going to include extending that pathway up from the end of this project to about milepost 83. And then we're going to build another parking lot on the water side for hooligan fisheries mostly. But so that project's it'll be bid over the winter, and I think they'll be able to finish that next year. But those things usually trickle into the next year for cleanup and what have you. But it's going to get done. We're about milepost 90 out here with the Alyeska Highway, so it's going to get us that much closer to that connection to that bird to gird trail. So we're getting there. The next project is this Seward and Alyeska intersection project that I've had some interest in that. That's been going on forever. And when we first started it, it was a right-of-way action that the goal was to buy right-of-way on the other side of the highway so that we wouldn't have like the Skyline Mall type of conflict point, I guess, on the highway. But kind of since then, and really when we started that, there was accidents there, crashes there, but it wasn't comparing it to other intersections in the state. It's a minor intersection. It wasn't really high on the list as far as being a problem. But in the years since, it's kind of risen up on the list. So there's definitely a need there. Like I said, I've had some interest in the project, and I've been to public meetings throughout the last few years while I wasn't working at DOT. So one of the first things I did was meet with those folks and talk to them about where they were at, and just I looked at some public comments, and then I looked at the size of that project. And I guess this is probably my personal view more than the DOT personal view, but we have a lot of big projects right now that are really sucking up a lot of funding. And to be able to fund a project that's in the $70 million range is going to be really challenging to do in the next, in the next few years. So what I've tasked that group with doing is kind of taking a look, same idea as out here on a much bigger scale, but I want them to take a look at maybe coming up with a phased approach, something that we might be able to build in the nearer term that's going to improve the crashes at the intersection there, and then also fit in with what might be our ultimate build. It's a smaller project, but I feel like if we take it in bite-sized chunks, that it'll be something that's fundable and concept level at this point. And I'm thinking, we'll probably have, if we change our plan, we'll probably know in the first quarter of next year. So it won't be anything that we'll be able to just hustle out, but first quarter of next year, probably. And I'd be interested to know what people think about that. Does anybody have any opinions on that or project in general, or?
Go ahead.
You don't have to tell me. So.
Actually, this board has that. I think that's great information. Thank you very much for the information. And I would assume that this board is interested in intermediate steps. This board has voted opposition to the giant trumpet line as being out of scale with Girdwood, but also overly environmentally impactful to a pretty treasured area. So that's what I would say about that. Is that fair?
And Mike?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary of where the board is, probably where most of the community is. When you say reducing crashes, I think one of the things that the engineering team, the project team mentioned a lot was the traffic going into and out of the mall. Would that be the first focus, do you think, rather than realignment?
I think so. Yeah, access control there. And again, I don't want to get over my skis at all, but yeah, in my mind, it's confusing. Actually, when we first started looking at it years ago, I was surprised that there wasn't a crash problem there. Not that I'd seen a lot of crashes, but it's just confusing with all those different access points and access points or conflict points. So usually they create problems, so.
My second question was, I noticed given the impression as the design was being put together, there was a high priority and a relatively short time scale before construction. But I noticed that the STIP had been pushed out to, I think, six years plus in the future.
Yeah.
So was the decision to sort of scale it back made some months ago? When the STIP was put in?
That's, like I said, that's my personal thought. I thought it was something that we should take a look at, because again, that has, I think it's an important project. There's a need there. I don't think we have way more needs than we do funding. That's statewide for everything, so to be able to squeeze that into a bite-sized chunk, I think we'll have a better chance of getting something delivered sooner. I don't know when that is.
I guess my question, sorry to rephrase my question.
Sure.
The STIP did push the project out further than we were led to believe from the project team. So is that the decision that's effectively been made, that's now solidified? So even if there's a smaller scale project, we're still talking 5, 6, 8 years.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And I think that the project team was probably giving you the best information that they had.
Exactly. I think that was the situation at the time.
And I appreciate their optimism in that schedule. But, our funding is a little bit fluid in that projects can move around. It's a living document. There is some planning that goes into that, and they're prioritized on a level of need, but money frees up sometimes. Sometimes we get money from other sources, and so it'd be good to have something on the shelf so that if the money comes available, that we can do something with it.
Thank you.
We have one question online too. Amanda?
Thank you. And thank you so much for all the information and presentation. I also appreciate the idea of doing it in a phased approach. Similar to Mike, I think that it seems like the mall being a point of a good place to start would be awesome. And that might be a good way for Girdwood to ease into the idea of a change that big. And thank you again.
Good. It's, you know, I haven't seen a concept yet that is, that I could see the mall really getting behind, I guess. I don't know that. I'm just kind of speculating on that, but it's important to have, you know, for them to have safe access, and access as convenient as possible, because it's important for them to be able to do business down there. So that's probably the biggest challenge we have. So, and anyway, I appreciate that.
Jennifer, did you have?
Just real quick, thank you again for that, the idea of kind of breaking it small, because I think we all got a little frustrated with on both sides with feeling between a rock and a hard place on wanting to solve the safety issues there, but not have something gargantuan. And, you know, but there is one other potential place to start, which would be addressing the left turn heading south. And
Yeah.
that I think that's another real issue, especially in the summer.
Yeah, it's easy for me to say that, you know, we're going to come up with that smaller, but
I understand.
really a trumpet
But thank
solve
you for
everything.
the effort. I thank you for the, I'm just saying thank you for the effort. I'm not holding you to it.
Yeah, and I'm sure, you know, and those guys have thought through this, so I think they have some ideas that maybe we'll resurrect and put some new eyes on it and see what. But
Thank you.
you know, the project we drove down on the way down here with McHugh, where you have to make that shoe fly, was the only project that I didn't think to get a status on. So as I was driving through it, I was like, "Crap, how long is this going to last?" But I do know that, you know, we're jacking a pipe under there, and we keep running into rock that we didn't expect there. So you drill a hole every, you know, 1 or 2 holes there, and it doesn't tell you what the rock does between. But anyway, that last one's 98 to 118, and I think that Amanda's going to talk about that later on, so I won't say a whole lot about it, but that, you know, we've been trying to do something on that stretch forever, and maybe the easy parts are all done, but that's an important piece for me because, you know, my family travels that on a very regular basis, my kids, my grandkids. So it's another big elephant that I think we're going to have to bite off in small chunks, but I think we have the right team on it. And yeah, I'll let Amanda talk about that when it's her turn. But there is a public meeting here, which I'm sure that she'll mention on the 6th from 5:30 to 7. So, and I'm glad to see that someone from GBOS is on that steering committee there. So, all I got.
Thank you. And thank you, Shannon, for being here. Okay, we'll move on to the Glacier City Development presentation. Is Nate online?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
All right. Awesome. So I have a little bit of a presentation here. I'm going to make it fairly short because I know you guys have a long agenda and a long night ahead of you. Plus, I am on the verge of losing my voice here. So I'm just kind of go through a recap here. And what we're doing currently is that this is a proposal to amend our master development plan. Our development master plan, it was approved through the Planning and Zoning Commission last March in 2022. And just if everybody on the line or who's listening to this doesn't know what this is, what we are is it's a mixed-use project. We have residential units near the back of it, and if you ever take kids to school or anything, you'll it's kind of hard to miss them. We have 2 buildings, and they each have 5 units. The south building is completed, and people are living in them currently. And the north building is currently under construction, and we're hoping to be done in June of 2024. So this lot has a street frontage that it's going to be a commercial building on the southeast corner. Our initial plan, and if you look at this initial slide, that's you'll see this building kind of crammed into the southeast corner there, and that originally was a 2-story, like about approximately 8,000 square foot building. So if we can go to the next slide, and I guess I'd point out on this slide, if you'll notice that there was the parking, and this is the crux of the change here, is that the municipal ordinance has changed. if you didn't know, the municipality, the assembly, the mayor has changed the parking ordinance to where there is no true parking regulations. So with this, we can go to the new slide. We've tried to incorporate this to make it a much more functional site, so it's not just a huge parking lot, and to allow for, some commercial development and some outdoor space, some green area, and some additional development areas as well within this lot. Under the previous plans for the building, we were required 96 parking spaces, and 79 of those were for the commercial building. And then of the 79, 35 were provided through a recorded parking agreement with the so that were all community parking spaces. So another change is that on the what is that? Sorry, what corner is that? The northwest corner is an additional area for a potential commercial. So as you can see, this building that we're proposing now is no longer a two-story building, it's a single-story building. And that is derived from, like, one, the cost of building, and two, we didn't feel like a two-story building was fit into the landscape there, and also incorporating a lot more outdoor space, patios, covered walkways, and the things that I think all Girdwoodians enjoy to do, while still providing some adequate parking on site in conjunction with the community parking as well. As you can hear, I'm on the edge of losing my voice, so if anybody has any questions and I can just open it up to that, please feel free. This picture here is not an accurate representation of the building that the building footprint, but it was an old rendering, and I think it's just kind of cool to look at this for a reference of where this is at in Girdwood. But the commercial building is a lot smaller than that, and it has a larger patio areas and covered walkway areas.
Thank you, Nate. And we caught, I think, pretty much all of it. So thank you for your voice, for the update, and being here this evening with the sketch and diagram. I'll take any comments from the board or questions. Mike?
Thanks, Nate. Well, one quick question. Can you remind me again, what's the net change in parking on site?
Yeah, so like I said before with the old ordinance, the required parking spaces were 96 parking spaces, and of those, 79 were required for the building. Now, granted, that building was over an 8,000 square foot building, and we basically divided that in half. Excuse me. And so the net change of that, currently we have I think 14 parking spaces on site currently.
And it was around 35?
Yeah, correct.
So it's basically 21 fewer spaces than the previous plan. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm still looking at the diagram, Nate. This is Brianna, but I appreciate the amount of biking parking, but even more biking parking when it is reality. Jennifer or anybody had their hand? I didn't see. Jennifer?
Yeah, I just have a quick question about, I think in the original building, that second story was, if I remember correctly, the second story was going to be, have the potential for use for group events. Is that correct? And now.
Yeah, that was the original idea for it, yes.
Is Is that part of the idea behind the use of the new design?
No, I mean, unfortunately, with the rising cost of building anything, when you go to a two-story building, your cost exponentially rises because now you're in the realm of providing for fire suppression systems, alarm suppression systems, and we just can't. I mean, it's difficult enough to swing a commercial building, period, this day and age, but that was beyond our reach. So I guess the answer is no.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Guy?
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the presentation. This is Guy. Just out of curiosity, what do you envision if there is overflow parking? Where would that go, into the post office or along the road? Is there anywhere that you would think, where would you think your overflow parking would go?
Well, excuse me, Guy. Our original parking agreement, which I mentioned before, was recorded with the MOA. For our total parking that was provided, we had 96 parking spaces. And of that, there were 35 parking spaces that the municipality agreed to provide through a community parking space. And under the old regulation, it was within a 600 foot walking distance. And in that area, there were 70 parking spaces available within that 600 foot walking distance. So of the 70 parking spaces available, 35 parking spaces were like allotted to us for that overflow type parking. Now, with the new parking ordinance, so all of that has been kind of thrown out the window, right? But we are providing quite a bit of parking on, and that overflow parking would be absorbed within the community parking.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Thank you for the
Great.
update.
Thank you. And again, I'm sorry for the losing of my voice here.
We have great audio, so hear you.
Okay. Have a great day.
Okay, number 3, I see Senator Giesel online. So Kathy, please go ahead when you're ready. You're muted right now.
Let's see, I think I can unmute myself. I think I have, so.
Yes. Nope, you hit it again, maybe. Now you're muted.
Oh, sorry, there we go.
Yes.
Sorry. I just wanted to say how great that you had DOT Central Region Director Holland at the meeting tonight. That was a really great report. And of course, DOT's been one of the top subjects that I've been hearing about the last week and a half or so with all the snow, right? But, you know, I think a lot of positives have come out of this in that people are realizing how critical transportation is and how critical a role DOT does play. Without them, we can't have public safety, police officers, fire trucks getting to people's homes, ambulances, healthcare. People couldn't get to the pharmacy, to their healthcare provider appointments. Education, of course, came to a halt, and commerce. So DOT is really foundational. And I'm hoping that in our next state budget, we do a better job of funding them. There was a town hall meeting on Saturday. It was a Facebook town hall meeting that was sponsored by the landmine. And so they had the mayor on and several people, but they also had the audience have opportunity to speak. And several DOT employees spoke about how important it is and what a skilled job it is driving a road grader or a snowplow. I mean, these are skilled jobs. They brought up the need for welders and mechanics to keep the equipment operating. I mean, I just thought it was great to highlight these jobs that most people don't think of, that are critical for the functioning of our society. So I thought it was super great. The governor's budget will be coming out on December 15th. So I'll be keeping an eye on that, not just for DOT, but for a lot of different things. For those of you that follow this and care, I have hired Angela Rodell on my staff. Angela was the director of the Permanent Fund Corporation for a number of years. The corporation did quite well. The dividend, or excuse me, the permanent fund grew significantly under her leadership. She was let go, and I have hired her as my staff, and she'll be helping me follow the budget. As far as policy issues, I'm continuing to work on healthcare and behavioral health, but I've also been focusing on electric generation and transmission since we last talked, since this last GBOS meeting. I'm particularly concerned about the series of extension cords that we call our transmission grid. We are the recipients of $206.5 million from the feds to address upgrades to our transmission system. So I've been working on that, upgrading that system from Bradley to Fairbanks. On Wednesday, November 29th, so not this Wednesday, but next week, Wednesday, from 1 to 3, in the Anchorage LIO, we're going to have a legislative forum on this topic. We'll have all 4 of the CEOs of our rail belt utilities at the table, describing the problem that they face with the transmission, what they're looking at in terms of clean generation and how to get that clean generation into our transmission grid to actually dispatch the lowest cost energy around the state. So everyone is welcome. It's from 1 to 3, but it will also be streamed. So you don't have to drive all the way into Anchorage to hear about it. So anyway, I think that's about it. Thanks very much, Brianna, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy, for being here and highlighting that event also coming up. Any questions for Kathy? Senator Giesel? Okay, I see one online. Jerry or Carol, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Jerry Fox. Speaking of DOT, at the beginning of the summer, there was a concern of lack of funding for the Cooper Landing bypass. And then I heard from Jonathan, the project lead, that maybe the funding was acquired toward the end, but it makes no sense to get halfway through that project and then not have money to finish the project. So I would just hope that, I mean, we as, you know, Anchorage, Girdwood, we all use that road. Kenai uses it for all the commercial stuff. I mean, it makes no sense to not fund that project. So I just keep that on your radar if you would.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Jerry, for that input. I'll keep an eye out for it and keep reminding me of that.
Thank you. Okay, Jerry's hands down. Anything else for Kathy? Okay, thank you, Kathy, for being here. And is Representative Laddie Shaw here?
No.
Okay, next we have mayor's report. If anyone is here from the mayor's office?
No.
No. Okay, just checking. Then the assembly members, Randy Solt or Zach Johnson?
Randy sent in a report. It's in the packet tonight. You can see it here. He's traveling, but he gave a pretty thorough breakdown on all the different things they're dealing with. So you'll find that in the packet tonight online or here at the meeting in that aspect. So quite a bit of stuff in there.
Thank you. Thanks for including it there too. Anything else? Okay, we'll go on to if ASD board liaison Margot Bellamy's report is also available.
Here. Yep.
This is a question I referred to her from several months ago that we had as a community. So she answered it very promptly with this. And then of course we had a bunch of snow. So it's not really fortuitous, but she got back to us quickly on that. So her report is available at the FCC website as well. So we'll move on to supervisor reports if there's nothing else.
Can I make one comment to Jerry's
Gary's, I guess it was more of a comment than a question.
Please, go ahead.
100%, once we start a project with federal funding, we have to finish it. So we will finish it. Nationwide, over the last 3 years, cumulative on government contracts, we've seen like over 40% inflation on the cost of government contracts. And I think, I haven't done the math, but in Alaska, it's even higher than that. We talked before about a pinch in our program. That project, I worked on it 2020, was $500 million. So, right now, I think the worst case, they kind of did a risk-based estimate. They're up to $800 million. So there's $300 million there that we didn't plan for. So it's, like I said, we have a lot of needs. It's hard to spread that out, but rest assured that we will finish it. We will find money to do it, and we're kind of looking at some different options to do that. But that's all. Thank you for that.
Thank you for getting my attention, answering that for the area in the community. Okay, so we'll go to supervisor reports next. I looked over at Guy, so I think we all do, but
Okay,
if you want to go first.
there you go.
Yes.
Sure. Just a quick one on the Parks and Rec. The Girdwood Trails Plan went in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission on November 6th. It was presented to them. Several people there to speak to the project. Commission asked some good questions. They voted unanimously to. So now it goes to the assembly, and that's going to be January 23rd, I believe. So if you're interested in that, there'll be another public comment period, and it wouldn't hurt whether you're for or against it. If you feel strongly about it, that might be a good meeting to be at.
Thanks, Guy. Mike, do you have an update?
Yeah, just a couple of things. You saw in Randy's report, there was a housing action week. The last week of October, first couple of days of November. I attended a couple of events there, including the Housing Action Summit along with Jennifer. And I think it was a very useful and interesting day. And presentations were good, but the discussions sort of round tables and in the small groups was so very, very useful. I think I definitely managed to say a lot about how Girdwood was different and similar. And I think I heard quite a lot about other communities, about other parts of Anchorage where there are kind of slightly different issues from what we're hearing as just a single big picture. So there's a variety of issues across the community. And I think that was one of the things that was clearer. I've also been following the budget process fairly closely. And because at least one item on that tonight. As always, housing and particularly temporary solutions are top of my mind. So we'll probably talk about that.
Thank you. For the fire department, for my report, I have not much outside of what's coming up on the agenda, but we did have a meeting with the Girdwood Board of Fire Department, BOD, a joint meeting, and unfortunately I wasn't able to make it. So thank you for the board for being there and going over important items to discuss for this year and ideas for next year, and Chief Weston for organizing that. Jennifer.
I don't have an additional report because so much of what LUC is talking about is one we're going to be talking about. So
Okay.
I'm going to leave it.
Great. Amanda.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to say a huge thank you to Kyle and Western Construction for that amazing response during the big storms that we've had. It was just like amazing amount of snow, and really appreciate the effort. So the Girdwood Public Safety Advisory Committee had a coffee with the cops on Saturday with a great turnout. Thank you to Tommy O'Malley and Gator for organizing and hosting that. The Public Safety Advisory Committee did vote to approve or recommend, well, we're talking about that in a second, the improvements for the police station and support the fire and EMS volunteers having a property tax exemption. And then lastly, the Safer Steward Highways Initiative. I've been going to the working group meetings for at least 6 months now, I think. But we're at the point now where there's public outreach, and December 6th, we're having a meeting here in Girdwood at the library, or probably the community center, from 5:30 to 7:30, presentation starting at 5:45 p.m., where the DOT and their contractor HDR will be presenting about the project. And the project is to propose reconstruction of the Stewart Highway between mileposts 98.5 to 118, Bird Flats to Rabbit Creek. The purpose of the proposed project is to improve safety and reliability of all corridor users. The DOT is currently working on an environmental assessment, and the project team will present data about the safety problems and progress made since the last open houses. So if you are interested in that, please come down. And I think that we have Chris Hughes from HDR on the call too to answer any questions if anyone has any about that meeting and project. That's all
Thank
for
you,
me.
Amanda. Okay, thank you. Anything else from anyone?
Okay, can I just say one thing? I just wanted to follow up on Amanda's comment about it was just a standing ploughing work in Girdwood mediation. I noticed that the mayor, his first public announcement about the ploughing was photographs of how well Girdwood was doing, which I thought was very interesting.
It's great.
Thank you, Kyle.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All around, thank yous. Good job too. Okay, I don't think we have any questions for Chris. So thank you for arranging that. Committee updates, any other committees that can see minutes online and links? So I don't think there's any significant committee updates. I don't see any hands. Next to status of proposed Girdwood developments, and that's in the packet number 6. Last meeting, this was recommended to be updated so that we keep it current every month. Anything there, Kyle, that you see addressing?
Nothing at this time. I think all the projects right now, this time of year, it's always slow to get any updates on this stuff as we're in the holiday season. So, but we'll probably have more updates as we head into January.
Okay, thank you for keeping this here. We'll go to number 7, service provider reports. I saw Chief Weston here. So 5 minutes for each of these if we can.
Okay. So I wanted to say nice things to DOT, but they left. So first, just a shout out to the DOT snowplow operators and also to Kyle Kelly and the road service area for doing amazing work on a mountain of snow. So just thank you from us for emergency response. It's huge. For us, as you know, we had a call in the middle of the night during the big snowstorm. We have a Unimog, which we roll out for extreme events, and we use the Unimog to, at times, tow the ambulance to get it unstuck. And that worked actually really well. And then we used the Unimog to actually go pick up responders from areas. So as much as I've always looked at that and thought, are we actually going to use that? We've now had 2 or 3 opportunities where we've used it, and it actually was super good for us to have. That's a piece of apparatus that we were gifted by the Matsu Borough, and they were using it at Butte Fire and needed to put it to a different fire department, and we've actually used it for good service. So it is a fabulous way to get places when nothing else can get there. And our other, so I wanted to speak in support of the Unimog and just say I'm glad we had that sort of tool in our toolbox. And then along with that, in October, we had 31 calls, so right on track where we normally were. 84% of those were EMS. I've already talked, I think, at the October meeting about the cardiac saves we had during October, and part of that was due to good staffing.
We've had 20 calls so far in November. As of, I didn't have a call today, but had 2 yesterday. 75% of those were EMS. Today, Girdwood, after about 2 hours after the power was turned back on, Girdwood lost all cell and landline communications. And it was on the, I just got off the AFISA meeting with the other chiefs along the corridor and found out that it was an AT&T problem. One of the things that was interesting when that happened was I did check and tried to do a 911 call from the phone, and, using the SOS feature. That also did not work. So it was only for a period of about 5 minutes, but I thought that was interesting. We were, when we see this come up, we start checking all the different ways, and Anchorage wasn't aware that there was a problem. So we were very thankful that it came back after 5 minutes or so, but Kenai Peninsula was also experiencing that. So anyway, just a reminder, we are the only medical provider for 15 hours each day on weekdays and 24 hours a day on the weekend. South of Potter's Marsh. Our staffing model, again, is 3 on call 24 hours and then 3 paid on call for response. And we currently have 7 new members that started that you'll see now on calls. They started a couple weeks ago, and nobody from Girdwood, unfortunately. But these are all people that are eventually wanting to go on for careers with Anchorage Fire Department, and they are starting with us. So, and we have 1 member picked up by Anchorage Fire Department's recent hiring, and so they'll probably be leaving us in January. And then we have 2 long-term members with over 5 to between the 5 and 10 years level of experience that are officers that will be leaving us, and 1 leaving us now for a job, and then another leaving us, moving out of state in about 6 months. So we are losing some experience, but we are, filling the pipeline and growing new members at the same time. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Chief Weston.
Well,
Go ahead.
I probably should have mentioned this outside the meeting, but there was actually an outage and a few people experienced it during the power cut the previous week.
Oh, interesting.
5 or 6 hours.
Interesting.
Cell phone service was lost for part of it.
Oh,
It was
interesting.
picked up in other parts of the month. So I can follow up with you.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. We're definitely tracking when we lose these, because sometimes they don't affect Anchorage and it's just the Kenai. And that was good. That's part of the benefit of once a month, right before this meeting, I meet with the other chiefs in the Kenai Peninsula down the highway corridor, and just we share things that are not happening in Anchorage that are happening, affect us.
Yeah. Thank you. And I know also we'll have another item coming up on the agenda.
Yep.
So Chief Ashe, see you online.
Yes, I am. Yes, good evening. Basically, for the month of October, we did several community events. We did the ice cream with the kids that Tommy O'Malley and the ice cream shop facilitated. We had a great turnout over there. We had Whittier police officers as well as representatives from the Forest Police, Park Service Police that showed up there. We also we agreed we were going to participate in the trunk or treat event, but apparently that got canceled. On October 31st, sent officers to the Girdwood School just at the closing of the school day to hand out glow sticks to the students as they leave. Additionally, officers participated in the Cabana Land trick-or-treat event with Girdwood Fire. Other events we had was this last weekend, we had the Coffee with the Cops over at the Grind. Great turnout there as well. We also invited again the Park Service Police Officer Linton showed up there. We had good participation there. Tommy made some great homemade pies for everyone in attendance. So I'd like to do a great shout out to him as well as the Grind for facilitating that event. For the month of October, stats was identical number of stats we had in September, just the various areas changed. Traffic and DUI, we had roughly 23 calls. Security business checks, 54. Suspicious activities, 2. Property crimes, includes thefts and vandalism, 4. 7 assault or disorderly conduct calls, 6 civil problems or public assistance, 9 welfare checks or alarm calls, and then animal calls we had 5. Agency assists we had 3, and two other that's not categorized in that. Agencies, this could be various agencies, including state agencies, other municipal agencies, not just Anchorage Police, but it's other agencies as well. And with that, we also had some local training for our officers here in Whittier. We did a use of force training, reality-based training using simulations and stuff for half the Whittier Police Department. That just reality-based training is important because it gives various roles for the use proper application of force, less lethal force as well as potential lethal force, as well as using verbal contacts or verbal judo to de-escalate situations. It was quite successful. We used participants included members of the Whittier Fire Department that participated as players in that event. We plan on finishing off the second half of that event by next month, so we have all our officers going to that. Other than that, it's been business as usual. Again, echoing the thoughts of the fire chief, is I'd like to also thank DOT. They did a phenomenal job, not only in Girdwood area, but in Whittier, and as well as Portage Highway, as Sewer Highway, clearing off all the snow we've had in the last couple of weeks. As that's business as usual, gearing up for potential more winter events coming up in Girdwood. I also sent my report and stats to Kyle. I just sent it during the meeting, so he probably just received them. If anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Ashe. Any questions from the board? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you again for the updates and all of your service. Kyle, you're next.
As always, our report is in the packet here, probably towards the bottom, but it's in here and
At the very bottom.
very bottom. Margaret does this to me. Anyways, I'll start off with a huge thank you. You know, we were doing a lot of work with the snow removal, but we had a lot of good support out there from other contractors as that storm erupted and grew significantly. We were preparing for snow. We were preparing for rain. We had spent the whole afternoon making sure all the sanders were good to go, as the report called for rain and inches of rain. And so we sent the crew to bed about 8 o'clock at night, and then by 11:30 we had to make a decision to bring them back out. And half of our crew lives in Anchorage, and so they drove that highway down here at 2 in the morning, and then proceeded to start. And then they went for 16 hours, and then they actually got rooms at the hotel so they could get back up the next morning and continue to clear. And we really thank Bob Redmond, who stepped up huge and came over and cleared the apron at the fire station as our guys were getting going. And then Mark Baumel for going out and helping to clear Alberg out to the Code Red that was at the hotel during the peak of the storm. And then everybody involved, digging out hydrants to shoveling walkways to cutting down fallen trees, to just letting us know things are going on. It was really a community event to tackle that. That's where we see the most success there. Just gonna screw this. The other things that we've been working on is that we've moved into year-round staff handling park maintenance, and so we did fall behind with garbage during the snow clearing, and so we do ask if anybody wants to adopt a garbage can. Last year, Don Davis was a huge volunteer for us and helped us with garbage pull. If anybody would like to get involved with that, we are seeking volunteers, and if anybody just wants to give us a call and say, hey, the can is full, that helps us too sometimes, and we can just tackle them. But we do try to get out every Tuesday and Wednesday to go through and pull every station and clean them and set them back up for the next week. With that, we want to give a big thanks to our trail volunteers who've been out grooming and getting the trail set, and particularly dealing with fallen trees. I think there were 7 huge trees that came down, and the volunteer crew was out there cutting them up and heaving them off the trail, and then proceeding to compact all the trails. We just got compaction and sort of built the trail behind the church, so we're connecting Moose Meadows to the upper valley. It was, the ground is completely thawed underneath. It'll be a nice breakup because this insulation factor now has protected that ground. But when you go along and you hit these divots, you sink right in. And so we have to be careful on the snow machine. So we're out there shoveling, filling in low spots, then compacting it with foot, and then taking a machine over them. So it takes time to get these up, but it was all done volunteer efforts. We appreciate everybody doing that out there in that aspect. We did talk on the trails plan, and as Guy said, we'll be going before the assembly. It will be introduced on June 9th, and then for public comment on the 23rd, and then consider for their approval that night too as well. And we thank everybody who turned out, and it did pass P&Z 7-0 for the Girdwood Trails plan. That's been a long time coming. We did, right before the snowstorms and everything came, we finished grant season. So we, Margaret and I finished writing for 2 grants, one for the land, water and conservation grant. We asked for $103,000 to help with the eventual John Troutner Pavilion over there. Right now it'd be a Lions Club Park Pavilion. And then we'd probably go through the steps after that to see if we can get it dedicated to John Troutner. So we applied for $103,000. That would include the building of the pavilion and then interpretive displays there. Maybe talk a little bit about Lions Club here in the valley, and then also other Girdwood history associated with that area. So that grant has been submitted, and then we'd also applied for recreational trails program grant, or as we refer to as the RTP grant. And we applied for $179,000 grant there. We would match 10% of that grant. And so we are proceeding forward with that at this point in time. So we will hopefully know something about that in the first quarter of next year. And then we are finishing up some grants, the KMTA grant. And we are also talking with the Rasmussen Foundation about a possible grant for the new suspension bridge, a tier 2 grant. So we'll be working with them. And that does lead me into the fact that we'll probably call a special meeting with GBOS. We'd like to talk to you about where we're at with that, talk about 35% design and the estimate we got back, and what partnership the service area may have in this. We are working concurrently with the Forest Service on this, and then with the Rasmussen. We've already received the state grant of $1.2 million for the project, and then we did receive through the CARES Act, which I consider federal money, $550,000 for the bridge, which we're using right now for design. So when we would like to have a special meeting with the board to discuss some proposed ideas to help us get over the gap, to get the final funding and hopefully get this out to bid for this summer, if not for 25. So we'll be working with that probably after the holiday here to organize something before Christmas. Social media and websites, Margaret always does a great job of keeping those up to speed. And we did use it quite a bit as a message board during the storm, recommending folks do not leave, stay in place. And we really appreciate people taking that advice and not trying to get out in the highway. Just getting out of your driveway, you would have got stuck. But it was really good to see people responding. Switching over the roads, yep, we did jump from mild fall straight into midwinter. So I always keep driving around saying this feels like February, but it's only the first part of November. So we still got a long winter to go, but it really shook the rust off the whole system, and we feel good. And the guys did a really good job of getting prepared and knocking it out. So that was good. We're working on major road projects. We are starting the process on the funding for the Ruan fish culvert replacement there. We have the temporary pipes in the long term is to put a nice box culvert in there that can handle these large storms, and also the things that come down with large storms like logs and stumps, and then also create a real fish passage so that hopefully that improves California Creek's salmon run. EPA holds the money, and so we're going through the process of writing the grant to ask for it. The money was congressionally designated for Girdwood for this project, but we have to go through this application process to the EPA, which is controlling stormwater funding. So we will be working on that after Thanksgiving and get going forward. That will require a 20% match, so that will need to come from the service area, but we probably will have a discussion about getting AWU to pay for a little bit of that match, because we have a major sewer trunk that goes right through that. And one of the reasons for building a box culvert in the design is to protect that sewer trunk. So we'll work that out. That might take some political wrangling, which GBOS is good at. So we'll work on that next. And then the next one is the Davos Fish Passage. We are working on getting that project done this year. We got Mount Hood done, or Lake Tahoe done last year, and I think we should move to Davos. And probably part of the special meeting will be to talk with the board about approving increasing the Western contract. Right now, it's at a not to exceed of 700,000. But in order to tackle this project, and we would like to move that to $1 million so that we can still have some money to do other drainage projects throughout the valley. Right now, we could do the project, but we wouldn't be able to do anything else in the summer. All the funding would be dedicated to this one project. Western is really good at these projects. They did a great job on that Mount Hood. They're in-house and they're a term contractor for us already. So we like to move forward with that. So I think that'll be a topic on our special meeting that we talk with you about and doing that. Expenses and budget. We are behind on invoicing right now just because Western went from summer construction. Everybody worked up, every contractor worked up until November. We all hoped we had one extra week, but we didn't. And so we jumped right into winter, but they're catching up on their invoicing. So we're going to see a lot of, they have to get the invoicing into us in December so that we finish out with the end of year. So I'll have an update for you at the next meeting. And no surprises, I think we're going to have more expenses definitely for November than average. Our averages were usually in the 30,000. With much work we did just in the first week of November. I'm sure we're going to be having a higher bill for November, but that's just because of the snow. But who knows what the rest of November brings. And then December. So we'll see. We'll be examining that and watching it, but the funds are there right now and we'll have to pay attention to what it looks like towards the end of the year, but we're on track. Right now we have about 79% of our budget spent, which is good for where we're at for the last 2 months of the year for roads. For parks, we have 76% of our budget spent there. And we have some remaining bills that we need to play out. So we'll see those come in over the next 2 months. And then with police, we're at 75. With fire, we're at 92. The final payments, this quarterly payment for the fire department has been made. So there's some other lingering issues out there that need to be done. But overall, all the departments are where they need to be for this year. So they look like we should be under budget. With surpluses at the end of year, if everything goes right. We still got a month and a half to go, and you never know what's going to come. So those are all good. So overall, that's where we're at. And like I said, our request would be that we're going to probably set up a special meeting with you after Thanksgiving and talk about those two subjects. So open any questions.
Thank you, Phil. Lots of information. Anything from the board? Gotcha.
Quick question, anything got you just got this 35% design, which comes with the cost estimate? Anything get you off guard there, or is it exactly what you planned?
What I caught was that there is what we call a estimator contingency. And so that's when they haven't done a project like this or estimated a project like this before. And so they slap on a huge contingency. And so talking with the engineers and the other project managers, they said this is common when you see a project, because a suspension bridge like this hasn't been built in Alaska. There's been one in Byers Lake, but of the size of ours, it's different. And so what they will do is put a huge contingency on that. We've cut that contingency down to a typical contingency, which is usually 15 to 10 to 15% of the construction costs, which is coming around $2.1 million, which has been in my mind since the beginning that it was going to be in that area. The factor that we have to always deal with is inflation. And Sean Holland just made that point, and we just don't know where pricing is going to be and what things are going to be at by the time we get to construction. And the way that things are moving right now, we're hoping that inflation is settling down and we feel more confident about pricing. But, if inflation continues to go on a wild ride, who knows what just one, galvanized bolt's going to cost, 6 months from now. And so, I just went to Home Depot and bought galvanized pipe today for a project that we're doing. And I was like, this is incredible, and so it's a factor that we're constantly trying to figure out as we go forward. So with that, one thing we want to be prepared for is we want to put this on the market, on the street. And if it comes in and we don't get the money, we stop the project and we figure out where the money comes from. But we won't know until we bid it. That's sort of the unfortunate factor that you can go through and look at all the things, but really the unknown factors is like, what is helicopter time costing now? Where's fuel prices? What is a specialized crew cost to bring up and do things like this? So there's all these things, but talking with the Forest Service, they deal with these projects all the time and they have a lot more confidence in a lower contingency than compared to what the estimator. And the estimator is going to put a high contingency on there because they just don't want to be wrong. And so a lot of times they just go, well, let's throw $1 million on and make you feel better, you know, like, or make us feel better, but doesn't make us feel better. So, you know, that aspect. So it's just those factors you're always trying to deal with.
This is at 35% design. So cost estimates 35% design are pretty loose anyway, aren't they?
They're pretty loose.
You know, you don't really think out to bid to probably 90% of wages. So I mean, do you see it as the design goes on that those upper and lower limits or upper limit will come to?
They may, but you know what? I think right now at 35% design on a suspension bridge, a cable suspension bridge, it's not going to change a bunch when we get to 95.
It's not
You know?
gonna be the designs.
Yeah, you know, we have a consultant engineer who builds suspension bridges all over the lower 48 and, you know, highway bridges, US Forest Service trail bridges. And, you know, he looked at the design, he's like, yeah, we're just going to refine the calculations at this point. What you have and designed out is what everybody wants and it looks great. You know, now we're just going to get in, we're going to look at all the calculations on cables and cable sizes, but he says things won't change much at this point, you know, so you're going to move forward in that aspect. So I think we're going to, over the next 2-3 months, we're going to finish design out. We have the money, we want a full design, we want something that's shovel ready. It just may be a factor of coming up with all the money to make it bid. So I don't think we're far away from it. And I'm making too much of a pitch right now, which I like to do in the special meeting, but I think this is going to be a gem of the valley and it's going to be a gem of the trail system. And I want to see it get completed from my perspective.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil. Anything else? Okay, we'll go.
Well, there might be something online.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Daddy.
Okay.
No, let me get, yeah, it does this when I share the screen.
Calendar's nice and bright.
Nope, no hands.
Thanks. Okay, we'll go on to public comment. Persons offering public comment must state their full name and address. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes and must be on subjects not listed on the agenda. Anyone here for public comment? All right, come a little bit more forward.
Sure.
Thank you.
Brooks Chandler, 174 Stowe Circle. The great Argentinian writer Jean-Louis Borges said, when I think of paradise, I imagine a library. And I've kind of shared that sentiment for most of my life. And if anyone's been paying attention the last couple of years, there's been trouble in paradise. And it's come, I think it's on the way in Alaska based on a letter that the Attorney General issued this week. And I just wanted to alert the board that part of the issue that's come up in other parts of the country has to do with, you know, what is in public library? What is the range of materials that are in public libraries? And it's become a flashpoint in some communities. So I just wanted to alert you to the fact that this seems to be bubbling at a statewide level now, and that there'll be a pretty significant reaction to this information from the Attorney General. And we have a booster group here in Girdwood that's sort of supportive of the library in general. And so to the extent members of our community are concerned with what's in the library, I certainly would urge them to reach out to the booster group rather than directly to staff. I mean, there's been a lot of abuse of librarians across the country from people of the public that don't agree with the breadth of material in their libraries. And also to the board, if you're hearing concern from our community about what materials are in our library, if you could alert the boosters, I have a feeling we'll be addressing it if in fact it becomes a local issue. And it may not, but it'll definitely be addressed at an Anchorage level, if not a statewide level, probably within the next couple of months. Because the reaction there'll be a fairly significant reaction to what's come out from the Attorney General. So that's my comment. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I saw a hand online. Amanda, do you have one comment?
I do. I wanted to put out about the Girdwood Annual Community Thanksgiving Dinner. That's this Wednesday, November 22nd from 5 to 8 p.m. at the Alyeska Day Lodge. And that's going to be hosted by the Girdwood Chapel and Food Pantry, the Turnagain Arm Lions Club, the Girdwood Rotary Club, Our Lady of the Snows, and True North Church. So if you are looking for some community and some good food, please come down to the Day Lodge on Wednesday.
Thank you very much.
So could you repeat the times again, please, Amanda?
5 to 8 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Don't see any other hands. We'll move on to old business. Update on scheduling approved 4-acre community meeting training on effective board meetings. Jennifer.
This is gonna be easy. I don't have an update for this because they were in the middle of an IT overhaul. So we've got a delay.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to an update after they get through that. Thanks for checking on it. Number 9, discussion and vote on GVSA nonprofit grant allocations. Okay, Kyle.
Yes, so this is the time when you guys make a determination on what you would like to, what the ground amounts would be for each grantee that's applied. So I'll just pull up real quick here for your perspective. Sorry. Okay, so these are the requests for this year. We've received a request for 10,000 from Little Bears, 10,000 from Challenge, 6,000 from Glacier Valley Transit, Girdwood Art Institute for $6,625, Girdwood Community Club for $8,000. So the total we've received is $40,000, but the restriction we have within our budget is that the grants are for total we have grants this year is $35,000. So this is the portion where we ask you to give us your determination of what grant amount for each one. And then keeping in mind that your totals will equal $35,000. And then through this formula here, or this spreadsheet, it will kick out the final amounts for each one. So maybe if you're all right, I'll start with Mike Edgington.
Okay. First of all, let's say thank you to everyone who presented. It's always actually one of our fun meetings of the year. It's great to hear work that everyone's doing in the community. Start Little Bears, I have 10,000. Challenge, I have 6,200. Art Camp, 6,600. Community Club, 6,200. And GVT, 6,000.
Okay, thank you. Brianna?
Thank you. I also echo what Mike said, and deciding is usually challenging for me, so I really appreciate my fellow board members helping average this out so it's not as pressure loaded. So I'll start with my order that I think I just heard. Little Bears, 9,000. Challenge, 9,000. Art Institute, 6,625. AUL, 4,375. 4,375, yep. And then GVT, 6,000.
Okay, Guy?
Okay, make sure I got these in orders. Little Bears, 9,900. Challenge, 7,800. The Art Institute, 6,500.
Sorry, 6,500?
Yes.
Okay.
Radio station, 6,800. And Girdwood Valley Transit, 4,000.
Okay, Amanda?
Thank you. For Little Bears, 10,000. Challenge, 9,000. The art camp, 5,000. Oh, sorry.
All right, 5,000.
Yep. KEUL, 5,500. GVT, 5,500. Does that work? Okay, good. Thanks.
Yep, numbers are good. And Jennifer?
Little Bears, 10,000. Challenge, 9,000. Art Institute, 5,500.
Oops.
KEUL, 5,000. And GVT, 5,500.
There it is. Okay, so with that, we end up with Little Bears at 9,780, Challenge at 8,200, Art Camp at $6,445, KUL at 5,575, and Girdwood Valley Transit at $5,400, equaling $3,500. So what we need from the board is a motion for these amounts, approving these amounts.
Okay, I move that we allocate the $35,000 for recreational programs as follows. Little Bears, 9,780. Challenge, $8,200. Art Camp, $6,045. Girdwood Community Club, $5,575. And Glacier Valley Transit, $5,400.
Thank you, Mike. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Guy. Any comments from the board? Could we have a roll call, Kyle?
Sure. Brianna Sullivan,
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard,
Yes.
Mike Edgington,
Yes.
Guy Wade,
Yes.
Amanda Sassy.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Thanks, everyone.
I'd like to make a second motion that we allocate $25,000 for funding to Four Valleys Community School.
A second?
I'll second that.
Second by Guy. Any discussion? Thank you for making that motion. I was just
I
gonna make
forgot to
sure.
ask, yes.
I-
Gonna be on time this year.
Okay, can we have a roll call, Kyle?
Sure. Brianna Sullivan,
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard,
Yes.
Mike Edgington,
Yes.
Guy Wade,
Yes.
Amanda Sassy.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Thanks, Kyle. Great. Math grid there. All right, moving on to number 10, GBUS approval of not to exceed 15,000 in improvements to the Whittier Police Station in Girdwood owed by ACS to be paid through temporary rent increase.
Yes, so we are looking to make improvements to the substation just to make the living and working standards better for the officers there. We do have officers that stay at the substation overnight. And so one of the projects would be a separation of the office and living quarters. Right now, it's just one large room. And so it'd be nice to keep that separated just to help with darkness. And also if an officer sleeping and another officer needs to come in, they won't be interfering and disturbing them. Also, secure door. Right now, we just have a chain that goes up to the office upstairs. So building a secure door that limits non-police personnel from coming up there. Sometimes people are just curious and don't realize somebody's up there and they come up. So we would like to have that installed. Install secure storage in the entry area for police equipment and testing equipment. And so right now everything is upstairs, and they would build out a storage unit that is downstairs that is secure. They can keep locked and only open by police officers. Simple things like window screens, and then a utility sink with a large countertop to replace the current sink battery, so it can be more useful for washing dishes and more utilitarian versus just being a bathroom sink that is currently in the bathroom and shower area. So estimated cost would be about $15,000. And that would be paid back over 3 years, so added to the rent each month, like we did originally when we transformed that area from the old telephone room to a functioning office and living quarters. So that would be over 3 years, and we would see that increase. And we probably would look at first quarter revisions to incorporate that increase into our budget, since that budget doesn't have really any wiggle room. So we would be working on that with you in first quarter. So if the board approves, we would get ACS started on that, and they would probably start on that in January.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. That was gonna be my question, when it would start, so they could have those improvements, even though the budget is for over 3 years. So I see, first I'll go with Amanda.
I would like to move to approve the 15,000 for improvements to the Whittier Police Department Girdwood substation.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mike. Any discussion? Guy?
Yeah, so the that budget is just a set budget every year. So we'd have to go, where would that money come from? Out of the, like, Parks Fund or some, one of those?
This would come out of the operating fund, so we wouldn't have to pay for it up front. It just, they would incur the costs, and then we would pay for it over 3 years of rent until we pay it off. And so we would be part of the operating, and right now we have a line item in there for the rental of the substation, so we would see probably a small increase for the $15,000 that we pay back over 3 years. For tenant improvements.
Mike?
Yeah, my quick question, the repayment would start in January, or would it start during the year?
It would probably start once we finish complete of the project. So we would probably get I would work with them to get an estimate, but it could start in January. But I don't think, I would ask them probably not to start until we get first quarter completed, which may be in June. That's probably when they'll be probably done with the project.
Thanks.
Anything else from the board? Okay.
Oh, Amanda.
Amanda?
Thank you. I just want to say again that the Public Safety Advisory Committee did vote to support this, and that I did the calculations, and I think that I did it right. Over 3 years, 12 months, a year, that's about a $400 increase to the rent. So just saying that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Anything else from the board? Kyle, could we do a roll call vote?
Sure. Brianna Sullivan,
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard,
Yes.
Mike Edgington.
Yes.
Guy Wade,
Yes.
Amanda Sassy.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your work on that, Kyle and everyone. Number 11, Girdwood Fire Department requests for GBOS resolution of support for Anchorage Assembly additional funding of $188,768 in the 2024 area-wide EMS funding for Girdwood Fire Department. I prefer to have Chief Weston speak to this, but this probably began from Chief Weston updating our assembly representatives and clarifying what's needed for the upcoming year. So thank you.
As you know, earlier during the budget process, we did get asked for the same increase from the Anchorage Fire Department, who we have a contract with. And we were told that it was flat funding again for this year. So the EMS funding has been at the same level since 2021. I did update both during the operating budget process for the municipality. I did update both assembly members. Actually went to all the assembly about our great cardiac save rate that we've had recently with our increased staffing, and then also kind of where we are budget wise. I had a huge amount of gratitude and incredibly surprised when we did have the assembly members step forward with an amendment which will be talked about tomorrow night at the assembly meeting, which is Amendment 10, to add the funding back into the budget for area-wide EMS4, specifically for Girdwood. My understanding is also that Chugiak Fire Department we talked to them. They're also putting in an amendment as well through their board members. And so they will possibly also be trying for an increase as well. They also haven't had an increase, I think, since our increase. So
Could you say that last part one more time about Chugiak?
Chugiak possibly will be also putting in a request. They also they're transitioning right now to have more paid shifts than they have had in the past, because they have had some staffing challenges as well.
Okay, thank you.
And then just a reminder, we are the sole provider of medical services for, I believe it is almost 15 hours a day during the weekdays, and then 24 hours a day on the weekend. South of Hoffman.
Thank you, Chief Weston. Do you have any edits to the version in front of you?
I see two laws on the second whereas.
Oh, yeah. Be the sole provider. Okay.
Which is just a, Claire.
I think, and Mike worked a lot on this resolution.
Yeah.
So he may have asked you about the.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So for people who might not be familiar with it, we have area-wide EMS includes extrication on the highway. It includes water rescue. It includes mud rescue, and everything that goes along with that. So, and then we additionally for EMS, we be our own controlled substance location. So we have to have our own DEA number. We have a few different EMS supplies and controlled drugs that we have to purchase, which are dependent on the fact that we are 40 miles, more than 40 miles away from a hospital.
Okay, thank you. Mike, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, a couple of quick things. One thing I heard you say earlier that EMS was 84% of the calls.
It was in October.
Is 70 a reasonable average, or is that really too low?
It's low, but it will depend on the month, right? So I think we were right at like 75 right now so far in November. So I think 70 is fine. It's definitely it's on the lower side, but it's not unrealistic. So summer when we're doing a lot more car accidents, water rescues, recreation evaluations, there's those things. So I feel very surprised that this amendment is forward, and I'm excited to see if it will pass tomorrow or if it will be vetoed by the mayor later on.
The veto campaign.
I feel like this is an amazing lottery ticket opportunity.
I'm just going to speak briefly to this. We know that the whole funding for area-wide EMS versus fire department has been a long-running problem,
Correct.
a long-running struggle. So we have, over 70% of the calls are for EMS, but over 70% of funding is for fire.
Correct.
Which can only be spent within.
Correct. And I will say, and I'm still thinking about talking about the Senate Assembly meeting at some point under public comment. The SEMT money that we received for, I believe, 2020, that the 200,000 came to us for the command vehicles and 200,000 to Chugiak, and then AFD received that money. When they received that money, for many years leading up to this, we were told by the fire administration that when that money came in, it would fix the area-wide funding problem, right? And things would be better. When that money was instituted through the municipal administration, well, they gave the fire department budget $12 million out in area-wide EMS. They also took out $12 million. So they didn't actually add the money in that would have supported the service and improved the service level. And then my understanding is that no money has come through since then. And so the 2021 money hasn't appeared, or the 2022 money hasn't been billed or appeared. And so where does that money go? And so there's been that decision by the municipality to absorb that money into the general fund or operating balance, it really doesn't fulfill, in my personal opinion, not as a fire chief, the obligation of where it's coming from which was supposed to be to shore up and improve emergency medical services, right? And there is, I understand you can do it, but to me, if you give someone $12 million and take it out of the budget, that seems like that's almost verging on supplanting the budget. I just feel like, wow, the municipality had this incredible opportunity to fix area-wide EMS and all the challenges with it, but they chose to increase and decrease the budget and make it net zero. And then from then, we haven't seen that. And there's many things, as we know, I do a lot of fundraising, an incredible amount of fundraising for equipment and services. We're approved to get IV pumps that are just $5,000, but they're not approved out of area-wide EMS. So, it's just, there's challenges. And you look at the things that are needed, like a new patient care system in Anchorage and our $400,000 radio problem just for our service area. And so there's all these things that money could have gone for, that could have improved and shored up the services. And so I feel like we shouldn't have to be at this stage of asking for money in an amendment if that money had been allocated, in my opinion, correctly. Just my opinion, but I feel like there was an opportunity there. And, other fire departments outside of the Anchorage area, chiefs ask me, hey, how are you using that money? Or how is your department using, how did that money improve area-wide EMS?
There is actually, there's obviously a difference of opinion between the Assembly as the legislative body and the administration as the executive body. But one of the things that passed at the very beginning of the budget process by the Assembly was a set of policy statements, which included that the SEMT money is not to supplant operational funding, it's to be additional. So how that actually works its way through the system, we'll find out tomorrow, I guess, at the Assembly meeting, but that was one of their stated goals.
But for years though, we were told it's coming and it's going to fix everything. Like all of the fire chiefs in Alaska were told this, and they went down a path, and then it just didn't seem like for Anchorage it materialized in the right way.
So there is at least a clear statement of the intent, and then we'll find out how that actually works its way through the budget process tomorrow.
Yeah.
We see them.
And then, the other thing was, the water rescue boat was funded in January and then we found out we couldn't, they couldn't provide the money. So for their half of it. So there's just challenges, I think, with this whole system. But again, a lottery ticket, super happy. And I'll take the lottery ticket.
Thank you. I could make the motion if we change chairs or if someone else would like.
Can we just formally make a motion to adopt this resolution?
We have a motion, we have a second.
Resolution 2023.
Well, second. 2023. Wow. It is a ticket. We have a second by Jennifer. Any further discussion, Guy?
Just a question, and I guess a comment. It brought up earlier, you're going through your actuals and you're like, 84% in October, 75%. Big numbers. So yeah, I definitely support this. I'm just curious, this dollar amount that is being proposed, was that thought as a sweet spot that then we could get this, or what was?
No, that was based on looking at what our staffing costs would be. The fire and EMS budget took a $30,000 hit with as we increase staffing, we also pay healthcare, right? So that was the healthcare increase. So that had to be divided between the two. Additionally, fuel costs, things like that. The IV pumps, which we would like to get. Also, water rescue training. We need to do water rescue training because of the turnover and all that. Mud rescue tool replacement. We haven't replaced the tool. We're still using the tool that was here when I started, and we probably should replace it. At some point it's still working, but there's all those costs. So it's not a.
So they want to do what?
Yeah, it's not a. Like a nice slush fund thing. It's more just things that we just cut things out as we don't do them, right? So, yeah. and staffing. And truly, I think the game, as we mentioned before, the game changed a bit when, you know, if both ambulances are transporting, and before we would be able to hopefully get an ambulance to come down and, you know, station move up. We can't always get that. So that next ambulance is coming. If you're the third EMS call and we're transporting, that third ambulance is coming from somewhere in Anchorage at the time of the 911 call. So we, you know, tried to staff up to at least support the community, and then also working with getting the AEDs donated across the community to sort of help us sort of prevent. Well, it's like prevention work, right? How can I game the system? If you change the game of the system, like nobody's coming, how can I try and safeguard the community a little bit better?
Thank you, Mike and Chief Weston, for your work on this. Also, I think it's important to come from this body, especially right before tomorrow's meeting, of course. Mike, did you have something
Yeah,
else?
I just want to offer one quick amendment. Based on the data we heard earlier, the penultimate whereas, if we could change the word approximately 70% to over 70%.
Definitely over 75.
Oh, okay, over 75%.
So take out approximately and put over.
Yeah, put over for approximately and change 70 to 75.
Keyboard on my. Oh, boy.
And then can I offer another amendment? Can I suggest something?
After we have a second for Mike's amendment. Also, second by Jennifer. Any objections? Okay, so Kyle's working on the over 75.
I think it's, yeah, I don't know if it represents at least someone else to do.
And then you want to keep the 27? That wasn't
Yeah,
math on this.
that's fine.
All right. Okay, Chief Weston?
Only the second whereas, and I apologize, I'm the one that probably provided that information, those wording. I think it's a stronger statement to say 15 hours a day during weekdays and 24 hours a day on weekends, like.
Right. I heard when you said that earlier, I liked the way that sounded. So
24 hours.
And I don't know what 15 out of 24 is off the top of my head, but.
Yeah, we could say 15 hours.
Yeah.
Jeez, this keyboard.
And a new keyboard for Kyle.
I might need a battery in here.
click.
On weekends, and then what was it?
15 hours.
15 hours a day on 15 hours per day, 15 hours on weekends.
Oh,
And 15 hours.
And then station, just a technical or dial point, station, yeah, DeArmond is,
On weekends.
yeah,
So
South Anchorage. Potter's Marsh.
Fleet terrain. Yeah.
that look good?
And we'll replace the word Huffman with Potter's Marsh.
South of Potter's Marsh. Potter Marsh,
Potter Marsh?
right? Fair enough.
Is there? Land of the Moose.
Potter. No, I think it's just Potter.
Potter.
I mean, okay. That looked good.
Okay, so I propose that change the second word.
Do we have a second for that
I'll
word
second.
thing? Thanks, Jennifer. Okay. Kyle, are you ready for any more cursor? You're okay there?
I think we're all good, huh?
Okay. Could we do a roll call vote for all of it?
Sure. Brianna Sullivan.
Sorry, I think to point out, I think technically we still have to do non-objection for the.
Non-objection
Second
for the Second Amendment. I can't remember if I said it. Any oppositions or objections to the Second Amendment? Hearing none, the Second Amendment has passed. And now we're on to approving this by roll call.
Sure. Brianna Sullivan,
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard,
Yes.
Mike Edgington,
Yes.
Guy Wade.
Yes.
Amanda Sassy.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Kyle. And I can sign that sometime.
We'll get it signed tonight.
Okay, tonight.
Yep.
Great. For tomorrow meeting. Number agenda 11.5, okay. I was gonna say 12.5. The STR item, we'd like to take that.
We'll start that. So as we had in, I think, previous packets, there is a proposed, or there was an introduced ordinance for a basic permitting scheme for short-term rentals across the whole municipality. My understanding, it's been currently scheduled for a public hearing on December the 5th. My understanding is we are likely to see an S version on that meeting, or possibly further delay in a public hearing after December the 5th with the S version being introduced. It's extremely likely there will also be a work session on that before the public hearing. Everything is kind of focused on the budget at the moment, so I haven't got much clarity on exactly what the plan is. My sense is it's unlikely it'll be decided on December the 5th. It'll probably be pushed further into December or January. I think the question we as a body can look at is whether this is enough, adequate for the problems that issues that short-term rental causes to Girdwood, our community in particular. I think this is a reasonable solution for Anchorage, where there's 1.5% of housing is involved in it. It doesn't address anything about the density of short-term rentals, their impact on other housing types, etc., impact on costs. It's really a sort of basic first step. There is an argument which I know that Assemblyman Salt has made, that this is only really intended to be the first step, and it's a data gathering exercise. It's possible, I still haven't got clarity on this yet, but it is possible that this process actually makes some of the things that Girdwood could use, or potentially could help Girdwood. This process could make it harder, because at the moment there is no statement anywhere in code about short-term rentals as a land use or as a permitted or licensed use of housing, of residential housing. This would introduce that kind of approval and licensing and permission, which can make it harder to potentially restrict things in the future, if that is something we as a community decide to do. It's something that many resort communities have done. So it would potentially take one of those options off the table, or at least make it much, much harder. So the burden of proof would be very different. That's the only particular downside I see with this particular approach, and that it just has a one size fits all. It doesn't distinguish between short-term rentals which are used as part of the house you live in, and short-term rentals which are run as a purely commercial exercise, or a purely commercial operation in housing that isn't residential, isn't used as primary residential housing. But my sense is that we probably have a little bit more time to deal with this, but it is not guaranteed.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Jennifer.
Yeah, actually, I think we had some kind of personal opinions sneak in there. The land use discussion about this was a little broader, a little different, and didn't necessarily focus on the exact same issues, but I do think there's an underlying fundamental question about whether or not we want to try to opt out of this completely. And when I talked to Randy about it, what he told me is that he thinks this is an argument for a zoning overlay for Girdwood. And that's what he said he and Meg are in favor of, which is interesting because Meg had just told us the week before that Assembly hates zoning overlays. But this particular thing is really so different. But this is a great example of the difference between Girdwood and Anchorage. Like that we have just almost polar opposite experiences, I think, with STRs. And also I think that the way they're being run as businesses is different too. And so I see, rather than that, maybe it's not adequate. I think it's in my mind and in some of the, what came up in the land use, it just isn't a good fit. It just isn't, it doesn't address our problems in it as directly as it could. And it actually doesn't give us the information I think we need either. I've long said, my opinion is that we really need to have an understanding of how many of our Airbnbs are being run as businesses, full-time businesses, as opposed to part-time or, private people using it to cover part of their mortgage while they are also using the place for part of the year. And it's kind of a critical piece for understanding as we look at regulation, because our numbers are ridiculous. And I know Michael Cruz will be on this one, but our Airbnb percentage is ridiculous. So we need to get some handle on what that's composed of and try to figure out how we can gain some computer housing if we can out of that. So anyway, long story short, however, it is tough. I've had a hard time communicating with Randy because of the travel and the time difference. And so we've been trying back and forth. But I think this will come down to, I think that GHEC is going to be looking at this, and I know we have Brett and Matt online, so you guys can correct me if I'm wrong about that. But I think that we will be looking at that, and I see Brett's hand is up.
Okay, I see too. Anything else from the board? Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to say so. Yeah, I think I'll rephrase slightly what I said at the beginning because I agree with most of what you said, Jennifer. There are kind of two basic issues that come up with short-term rental. One is impact on sort of quality of life on immediate neighbours, and I think this proposal does address some of that. In fact, it probably addresses most of that. It addresses a lot of the concerns we've heard. We heard on Echo Ridge and other areas. Mm-hmm. But once you get above 2 or 3% or maybe 4%, depending on the study, use of short-term rentals. Once that, because you get about more than 4% of your housing stock is used for short-term rentals, it has a huge effect on the price of housing and availability of housing. And that's the space we're in. And this proposed regulation does absolutely nothing and to help and potentially takes away some of the tools that we could use. So that's kind of a more succinct way of tying together what we both said. And you're right, it does not, although it's quote an exercise to gather data, it's an exercise to gather data we basically already have. The data we need is not part of it, at least not part of their current proposal. It could be in the future. But again, I don't think it doesn't address the most pressing issues in our community. So it's at the minimum, best case, it's a lost opportunity unless there are changes. And I agree, there are fairly obvious land use, fairly well-defined and well understood and used land use changes, which we could add to this. Whether we can timescale is unclear.
Right. So that's a great summary of that. I would add one other thing as a concern for us is that this also creates yet another self-funded government bureaucracy that we have no say in. So it feels to me like we don't need to repeat the creation of HLB and watch it happen. It's a little unclear on how that would function. Everything else, what is pretty clear is that once again, we wouldn't necessarily be seeing any of the funds from the licensing phase.
Yeah, that's something that would have to be.
That
have to see
needs some negotiation. So anyway.
Okay. Guy has something too. I was just trying to think if we do or don't know the time scale, what could we do meanwhile if two board members wanted to come up with something while things continue to move on the assembly level.
So to clarify on the timescale, it's currently scheduled for public hearing December 5th. That's what the situation actually is. Mm-hmm. I think it is likely it will be postponed further.
Right.
Or maybe there will be a short opening and then it will be delayed until a future date. But potentially it could be decided and voted in by the assembly on December 5th.
Okay. Guy?
I think part of what, I guess, what are you proposing? Are we just writing a resolution? Or are we proposing put some of our solutions in here that we spoke about and try to work those into it. I mean, what are you proposing to either oppose it as a board or support it as a board? Is that what we're looking at right now? Or to try to alter what they're building?
Good question. Before I answer it, could I ask that we hear from the GHEC representative?
Sure.
Yeah, and just kind of see what they have to say.
Okay, Brett, your hand's up.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in with a pitch for GHEC's upcoming meeting here last Wednesday of the month. We've been discussing this briefly, and we've had a couple ideas bouncing around about this. It would be, I'd like to anticipate getting something out of committee that might help answer, I guess, what our policy outcome goals would be. And then maybe some answers to how to handle whatever STR regulation comes down from the assembly. So we're still in discussion. I think that it goes a little deeper for GHEC in that we're looking for ways to have STR mitigate some of our housing needs. So we've been discussing it holistically, and since it's been on our agenda, it's old business. There's possibility here that we could get some recommendation towards GBOS out of our next meeting. So.
Thank you, Brett. Jennifer?
All right, so did you have a comment?
Oh. Brooke?
Sorry.
Raising my hand. Yeah, I'll just share on this that my perspective on it is that it's very unlikely you're going to get something out of Anchorage that applies to the entire municipality that's going to be a good fit for Girdwood, and that the policy position the board should take. And I've talked to Randy about this, and he's fully supportive of within the chapter of the zoning code that applies to Girdwood, that there will be a Girdwood specific land use regulation relative to short-term rentals. And so that's the policy I would urge you to drive forward with. I haven't paid that much attention to the details of this because in my mind, it's always been, there's going to need to be a specific provision in the Girdwood land use code that should be reflected in, input from the committee and in the comp plan that we're working on, and that it's going to be behind the curve of this particular ordinance. Which, when I read Randy's report in your packet, it seemed like he was suggesting that this wasn't going to be the end of the story for Girdwood, and maybe even Eagle River as well. Not sure. There's certainly example. I mean, I've worked on this issue in other communities, and there's certainly examples of things that can be done both in Seward and in Soldotna. Seward especially is a much closer fit to Girdwood because they have a severe housing crisis that is directly impacted by both investment and owner-occupied STR units. And the issue is not only what the rules are going to be, but how are they going to be enforced. And it doesn't do much good to get something on the books if you don't have a commitment from Anchorage to enforce it. But anyway, that's my comment on this. Yeah.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. There's some technical reasons why what has been proposed can't cover in its current form, can't cover the land use issues we need to cover for us. The way that an item is introduced has to explain every chapter of code that it affects, and it does not touch anything in Title 21. So the current item as it's written would have to be removed. Something else would have to replace it. And I've heard a lot of reluctance to do that from the two assembly members who are sponsoring it. So I think their opinion is we can do something secondarily after the fact. I think there is a risk there because what the licensing scheme does is sets up a structure where it says there's one size fits all. And it basically permits this whole class of activity. And then if you come along later with land use issues and kind of restrict it and try and turn that into two classes, it's very, very difficult. It's just that there's a mismatch between the two issues. And I haven't seen much support of trying to deal with these consecutively. Or, yeah, sorry, at the same time, not consecutively, simultaneously. So there's just some tricky technical issues about how we do this. And I agree, Seward has better scheme. Actually, the approach SIC has taken is quite good. Homer has been looking at it. Wasilla has a better approach than Anchorage does. So, and there's some good, very good examples that explicitly address the difference between commercial use and accessory residential use in, I think, 4 different communities I found on 48. So there are plenty of good patterns out there that we can actually do, and how we can get it through somewhat remote assembly is a different set of political questions. And I agree. I think it's going to be very hard to do that. It's going to be very hard to do that as a second bite, if you like. There is an opportunity now. If this slows down a little bit, there is an opportunity, hopefully, to try and force what we needed to, rather than hope that we get a second opportunity to review it. But this is kind of a political question, a process question.
Well, I would, because the two, Jennifer and Mike, are following this and speaking to the assembly members already, I would encourage you to continue so you have that familiarity of what they're saying and what keeps changing or what drafts are changing per meeting and what they've told you, so that we are as updated as we can be to find an approach. Jerry had his hand up, but I don't know if it's still up.
I'll make a comment. Yeah, that resolution doesn't do anything for our community. My question to Mike, though, is if this passes, is there some reason you don't think we could still make changes to our land use code to restrict Airbnb type, short-term rentals?
Well, there are 2 things. First of all, how we do it. There's probably not going to be a lot of incentive for the Assembly to approach this problem if it's just a Girdwood problem now. So that's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is that I think what we'd like to do, what I'm sensing by the conversation here, is we'd like to set things up as 2 different classes of short-term rentals. And it'd be hard to do that if the licensing scheme is a one-size-fits-all and doesn't make that distinction. So you could have 2 things going on in land use, but you could then never tie it to the licensing requirements. You'd have to have, it would be a blunter instrument. And to do it well requires the 2 things to be tied together.
I just don't understand why we couldn't do that in land use codes, split those apart.
There may be a way of doing that. This might be a good work session topic, actually.
Okay, thanks.
I was going to say one other thing. One thing I'm sensing is there is kind of at least one statement to probably make it real. And I'm wondering if we could do that through an action rather than through a resolution. So I would propose, I'm going to propose it, and then I'm happy if someone wants to amend it. So I propose that the position of GBOS is that the short-term rental ordinance as currently drafted does not address the key primary issues of short-term rentals in Girdwood. I'm trying to think of some better phrasing.
Are we making this, excuse me, I'm sorry, are we making a statement?
This would be a statement which we could pass to the motion, so at least it gives us something we can say we agree as a body.
Instead of a resolution.
And then we could perhaps come up with a resolution or suggested changes in the future. This gives us a starting.
So, for discussion, does anyone want a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And I've almost written that, but go ahead if you were going to say something next,
Yeah.
Jennifer.
I want to tie in with or address a little bit of what Jerry talked about. Again, I am very concerned about us allowing a bureaucracy to be created. And so one of the things that I've talked about, like, for example, and Mike, I know you've looked at this too, but Telluride has a system where the licensing is broken down based on under 30 days, under 90 days, and then over 90 days. It's a 3 different licensing thing. And when we talked to the assembly member, I heard this, well, we can't do that because we're trying to kind of dovetail onto existing technology. But I feel like we're using, if other communities can figure this out, then we're kind of using this outdated and overstressed IT to guide policy in a way, again, that doesn't. So, I mean, I just think we've talked about so many different issues with this, but long story short, I think it just doesn't fit. Whatever the issue is, it doesn't fit. So circling back to Guy's question, Guy, I don't think that we are at a point here where we know exactly what we want. And that's a tough thing to try to, and I absolutely agree with what Brooke said. I think we're going to have a horrific time trying to get this to change into what works for Girdwood, given Anchorage's completely different reality. So we're asking for, oh, you know, here we're this relatively small, at least population-wise, picture of what's happening in Anchorage, and we're asking for some really basic, huge changes to this. So I don't know if we're at a position where we can say, okay, you need to do these 12 things instead. But I think we can say, as Mike said, this doesn't work for us and it doesn't address what we need. And I have not seen a lot of push. I don't think that that's a politically treacherous thing to say, because Randy and Randy and Meg are well aware, you know, so I think this just makes it kind of, the sponsors of this already know that this is problematic. And I think they're frustrated with trying to make something that fits 2 completely different feet anyway. So I think it's, I think that this would mostly be helpful maybe to bolster both our case and their case for separating Girdwood out one way or another. It does come down to, you know, are we going to try to change this? And every little thing helps. But I would also like to see a statement for us that we would like to be opted out of this. I don't think we want a licensing. I don't think we want this licensing thing to be created over us and then try to get rid of it. I think that's going to be really hard. And we don't have any say in it, and we're not getting any portion of the, so we're not getting the information we need. We don't have any say in how it's run, and we don't get any portion of it back. I would really like to see, if it comes down to it, especially now that we have a housing authority, I would like to run this ourselves. If there's any way to do it.
Thank you, Jennifer. I agree this would be great work session topics, and we could emphasize and address the exact key issues in our statement. Because I know you were just coming up with the word key issues, or you just delineated some of them that they would understand already.
Right.
And apply them. And maybe that's why they're going to push it back after December.
Well, if we could, they got enough problems in Girdwood. I mean, sorry, in Anchorage, I think. Like there's a lot of refining just for Anchorage. Didn't get that sense, Mike, that this isn't quite where Anchorage needs it yet.
Well, there's definitely pushback from different sectors and individuals.
Okay.
But sorry.
Or Guy.
Yeah, no, I was a little taken aback when we put this in the, as old business, what kind of action we would have on it. But I do understand that statement in a, yeah, as you know, as you spoke of it, and the housing committee, doesn't seem like we have a definitive 1, 2, 3 that, and that's understandable. We're not the only people that are going to have this statement at the assembly meeting. It doesn't really fit us, you know. I would imagine we're not the, you know, somebody else will probably say that as well, because they don't want to see it or whatever. They're going to get opposition. But putting our name to a statement that it doesn't fit isn't really, you know, I mean, I think it allows for getting in the room and adding wiggle room to it. So, you know, I do like that. Yeah, I didn't know where this was going and where definitive change in policy right here, when everybody was not really.
Oh, well, all right, just, this was an oversight, and I know we should have had it on the agenda, but it was in new business prior, and it has been discussed twice through land use. So it was a goof up on this agenda, but we
I
didn't.
remember during the land use meeting that, yeah, the discussion.
Yeah.
I didn't see really any clear cut outcome of that either.
Right.
So I was a little.
Yeah, I think that's why I would separate out. We can make a statement saying this doesn't work for us because arguably it doesn't go far enough and doesn't address the specifics, the specific conditions where you have a high density of short-term rentals. I don't think we're at the point where we can say this is exactly what we want to replace.
No, I
or how we do it. So I think this is a step one. Then I would like to perhaps go on to the special meeting we will have after Thanksgiving and have 2 items on that. So, or maybe this is a separate work session. Maybe you have a work session for this and then the special meeting, or was it a work session you wanted?
It depends. I was gonna have a special meeting so you guys can do action.
We can possibly have them next to each other or something.
Yeah, you could put it in there anyways. If you don't have action, we could just combine it into that meeting.
Okay.
But okay, sorry, one thing, is that's about, that special meeting is about what we would want to see, or is that about, can we still agree tonight, we want to make a statement that we'd like to be excluded from this if at all possible?
I don't feel comfortable to say excluded because I think the 2 questions, I think we can agree that this doesn't solve the key problems, that the most pressing issues occur. I think that's something we can all agree. How we take that information and do the next step of whether it's a modification of what there is, or whether we do something, exclude ourselves and do something later that's completely separate. I think that question is, I'm definitely not ready to discuss. But I think we can go either way from this. This is just a statement to make it clear that this doesn't really address what we need. Now, whether that means exclusion or whether it means modification is what we can then discuss at a later point. But I don't feel now is a good time to sort of go through all of that.
I agree with that, but I think it needs more discussion. That's just my.
Okay. Thanks for the startup. So does that mean we need to talk about this anymore?
I think we have a vote.
All right, I have, motion is, the position of GBOS is that the STR ordinance as currently drafted does not address, that's where I have, key issues / specific conditions of our high density STRs. And maybe we could add after that, we look forward to discussing or coming up with.
We look forward to finding Girdwood specific solutions.
I mean, I'd be happy with it as it was without the addition.
Okay.
I don't mind. So it's fine.
So addressing key issues and specific conditions. I wrote of high density after some more. Yours.
I have one question for you.
Okay, done.
So what's the just exactly what is the statement is, not a resolution? How is this carried to the assembly? Will somebody be there and speak to the assembly in person? How's this related? So
If it's a motion, we're basically making an action to make a statement. We could do this in the form of a letter. Or we could just leave it as a motion. I think it's a clear statement of this doesn't address what we need. And then, stay tuned. That's really what we're saying. But it gives us, rather than having it completely open, maybe we support it, maybe we don't. We haven't made a decision. Now we've made a police decision that it's not enough. And then what we do next is the next step. But it puts a kind of line in the sand to some extent.
So this is written and just kind of stays with us, but they hear about it.
Well, I mean, maybe we can share that information. It becomes a minuted item. Otherwise, I think going to a letter or something is a little too much. But now I think it would be better to do that when we have some positive statement.
I agree. That.
Well, this also gives us a basis that each and every one of us can say the board agrees it doesn't fit.
Yes, exactly.
We don't, it doesn't mean we have all the solutions yet. We just know it doesn't fit.
Anything else? Okay, Kyle, I don't know if we need a roll call vote, but can we do a roll call vote on the motion?
Sure. Brianna Sullivan,
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard, Mike Edgington,
Yes.
Guy Wade,
Yes.
Amanda Sassy.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the collaboration, everyone. Okay, new business.
Sorry.
Oh,
Way of procedure.
yep.
Oh, sorry, that clock is off.
Yeah, that's right. That's all right. But since we have a whole bunch of new business, it's a GHEC, and I wonder if we could just take a quick break.
Okay, it's 9:20, so could we do 9:25? I'm
Absolutely.
amenable to that. 9:25.
Sorry, Brett and Matt. I know you guys have been waiting. We need to think straight.
Convene, yes.
Yeah. Does Cooper want to play any more baseball?
I don't know. Right now, he's really focused on basketball. Hang on a second.
Back in the session.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, we're back for new business. Number 12, GHEC recommendation for funding $TBA from the GHEC Capital Account Fund for a feasibility study for gravel infill and construction material exfil location in Girdwood. Who would like to speak to this?
I could start with this, and then if Brett wants to jump in, he can.
Right.
So we want to share with you tonight a feasibility scope of work, a feasibility study scope of work that I drafted and got input from Brett. And this kind of gives you an outline of what we would put out there to get a proposal to complete the work. And, you know, basically it starts off with looking at the background and history. We figured well, last time they did some excavation here in the valley might have been the early 90s, maybe late 80s, that came out of Glacier Creek associated with like Alyeska hotel build and things along those lines. So we would definitely get that history together from the locals who were here during that period. And so that would give you an idea of that. And then sorry, got some people coming in. And then I proposed the study and looking at exfil burial sites here in Girdwood and reliable Girdwood gravel sources. So looking at different areas, estimating savings for Girdwood land development using local infill and exfil resources. Locations, looking at possible quarry sites, burial areas with feasibility of each site. So, you know, Glacier Creek has been talked about, the old railroad DOT excavation site at the base of Orca Mountain, future opportunities with U.S. Force lands and portage, you know, really understanding what's going on there. We keep hearing that a NEPA is needed to be completed out there. Environmental assessment needs to be completed out there before they open up lands, but we would really want to get that down and in writing in this feasibility study as to what that looks like for the future. Private sources, you know, there could be something out of the mine at the top of Crow Creek Road, things like that, airport land, others. So just looking at all the opportunities that may be out there for future gravel in that aspect. Estimated amount of material, burial of exfil, and available at feasible locations. So looking at different areas, you know, if we have a place that we could possibly excavate from, how much material could possibly come out of there? If we had an area that could be used for burial of exfil, how much material could it take? So trying to understand that. Access to quarry sites. So that's like, how do we get to these locations? What does it mean? Haul routes from different sites. Residential and commercial impacts from the different sites. You know, we're very cognizant that there's lots of residential around possible sites. So we want to be aware of that. And then permitting required for each site. So that gives you a breakdown of the different hurdles associated with that. And then what would quarry operations look like? You know, who operates the site, who has access to the site material, things like that. Kind of gives a sort of a preliminary idea of how that might be operated. And the quarry operations, you know, what period for each site. You know, there'd probably be limitations that we're dealing with Glacier Creek because of salmon runs. And you know, there's probably limitations with each area because of weather and things like that. And so, and then the safety environmental management, you know, what that would look like or be required. And then site reclamation and future use. So, you know, like for example, in Portage, a lot of the quarry pits have turned into salmon breeding areas. And so they've been seeded or they've been built so that salmon come in there and breed and become fishing holes in that aspect. And then, as always, you get to the funding, cost and funding. So funding for source for the startup and operations, and then estimated revenue needed to sustain the operations. You know, the impact on taxpayers if this is a taxpayer project and things along those lines. So it's a study that would look at quite different areas in order to make something like this come to fruition and give us a hopefully a solid understanding of what it means to produce gravel from Glacier Valley. So I'll open up any questions. If Brett has anything to say, he could jump in as well.
Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. That's excellent rundown.
Okay, Brett's muted, so I think that was his. Any questions or comments from the board? Go ahead.
That's the question. So, you know, this, the Girdwood Economic Housing Committee is how does this tie into like the goal of this committee? Where does that?
Making development much more affordable. Because a huge aspect of like building more housing and helping to strengthen the economy through commercial development, even residential development is basically your foundation, which is gravel. So trying to start there, because right now, you know, we're hauling gravel from Matsu Valley here.
So, and this data would be available obviously to any commercial outfit, anybody that, you know, whether they're building, you know, housing or not, this information would be publicly available, right?
The feasibility study? Yeah, it would be a public document, yes. Yeah, we would share it with the board and we'd probably post it to the website.
And that's seen as one of the highest, I guess, where's that rank in the housing, in the grand scheme of housing? Where is that like the highest thing, the biggest barrier to affordable housing?
I think it really is dependent on where you build, you know, like down here where we are right now probably has some of the best foundation gravel in the valley, but you're in the floodplain, right? And so then when you move up into, you know, like one area that's being discussed is the soccer field. You're going to probably need a lot of good fill in order to put that on a true foundation. You know, if you did piles, it might be a different situation, but you still would need fill to put in roadways or gravel or things like that. So it just depends on where you're building in the valley. But you know, every building starts with the foundation, and a lot of times gravel is you know, gravel is becoming more. It used to be a cheap resource, and now it's becoming more and more expensive each year, just because now of extracting it and bringing it from, like I said, the Matsu Valley. So.
No, I said gravel's gold, right? I mean, you know, here in North Slowboro, anywhere, yeah. You know, cost to truck it in and dig it up. Yeah, I was just kind of curious why this committee, you know, kind of where they, like, where is that? You know, has all the needs of affordable housing, where does this fall in?
Yeah, I think they're, you know, really looking at the basics of how do you make a developer find a way to be attracted to a project that would be like workforce housing, and how do you get a return on that? And you hopefully help to find resources that build it to make it more affordable.
Thank you, Kyle. And to Guy, my first thought was economic development, but it definitely tied to housing. But I appreciate your order there. So I see the pans ordered online, but Jennifer, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to, Guy, the other thing is, as Mike and I were just in this housing summit, and one of the things the keynote speaker said is figure out what you can do right away. So this isn't about like, oh, this is the most important thing to do this is something we can do and get started right away. And and I'm sure I see both Brett and I thought Matt had his hand up too, but there's all kinds of other things, including more things on our agenda tonight that they're working on, but this is a right away kind of thing. And I know our local builders have said that it absolutely makes a difference that they are having to truck fill to the extent that they are. So they have said we can absolutely bring down building costs if we can bring down fill costs. So anyway,
Okay, I'll go with Mike first and Matt.
Yeah,
Mike.
can you hear me?
Now I can hear you, yes.
Great. Yeah, I had to leave the meeting room. There was something Kyle said. There was something that came up in the commentary earlier, which I thought was interesting. I'd like to explore a little further. I think Kyle, you mentioned could this be a publicly funded source? And I think I was assuming that this was a feasibility study, which would then go out to commercial operators. But do you see it as a possible option for operating a public source of gravel?
You know, I think anything's feasible. It's just a matter if it makes sense or not, to do it. So I didn't want to shut the door on that in the aspect that, it may be, you know, it may be in the interest of the service area to, have its own quarry site that maybe is subsidized, or there's revenue source that's brought to it to help, you know, make it work on its own that sells commercial. You know, I think there's some needs there that are, definitely the service area needs gravel. And we may be leading that charge. So yeah, there may be that option, but I don't want to shut the door on them saying that we're going to be fully dependent on a private development to make it work.
That's actually interesting. So I was thinking about the problem in a different way, and that's opened up another area of thinking about it, because I think one of my concerns would be what we're effectively doing is asking taxpayers to pay for a business plan and pre-development work for private companies. And obviously, you know, we saw earlier, I'm sure Nate could tell you how much money he's probably spent on pre-development work for the Glacier City Centre, and you know, that's not paid for by taxpayers. So starting up a gravel business or running a gravel business, it seems odd that the taxpayers would subsidize, especially if there's no guarantee that investment from the taxpayers actually results in the housing outcomes we want and need. So I was thinking about how do we make use of doing the feasibility study? How do we tie that into actually reduced cost housing for, you know, the community, rather than just increased profits for developers? Because, you know, if somebody will pay more money for housing, there's no incentive for a developer not to accept that extra money. So I didn't see a mechanism for linking those two, but I think in your earlier comments, you've at least explained a way that it could possibly be done. I'm not sure that's the way we'd want to go, but I think finding a way to tie together investment from taxpayers into the outcomes we need, I haven't yet seen, and I don't quite know how that would work. So that's something I'd just like to, you know, everyone to think about.
Thank you, Mike. Next was Matt.
Okay. Yeah, actually, Mike, in response to that, just briefly, I mean, I agree with you in terms of the concept. I guess my thought is I'd rather have the community in control of the feasibility study than all of a sudden have a third party or an outside party want to come in and say they want to do a feasibility study, and then we're at the mercy of what somebody else's wants to do in our community. So that's just food for thought. And just to go back to kind of Guy's points in terms of, you know, with the GHC, I mean, it's just, again, it's how do we kind of lower the cost per square foot? How do we lower the infrastructure costs, potentially interest costs, any sort of line item to make this pencil in? So this is one of the earlier things we're proposing, but you know, there'll be more, I'm sure. So that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Brett.
Yeah, thank you. And to Guy's question, I think the direct material cost is one obvious benefit, but there are other tie-ins to this. And I think, as Matt said, just removing the hurdles to development would logically lead to more development. So I just wanted to, and then to Mike's point, that is sort of an underlying concept with this. We've discussed in GHEC that this should not be a burden to a property taxpayer in the valley at all. It's sort of that, you know, chicken or the egg first, in order to define how this might look to gain community acceptance of doing this type of activity. But we don't necessarily have to be in the gravel business, but we need to be in the business of facilitating the ability to get gravel locally and handle exfil locally. So the vision is for a very modest, focused, limited for use excavation in the valley, for use in the valley by maybe several small contractors to be able to bid on a certain tonnage of material to come out during a very specific point in time, and not a permanent operation, so to speak. But the concept is that we may need to be in the middle to facilitate it, but the overall operation costs would be borne by those who bid a quantity of material to take for use locally. So it's just the general concept is not to be an extra burden at all. We don't want to be in the gravel business. We want to be in the business of facilitating good policy and availability of material in order to keep encouraging investment to happen here locally. So that's the overall thought. There are a lot of synergies with this activity and other projects that we're looking at. And I mean, one great example was earlier when Sean Holland from DOT came in about mitigating, say, scouring of the bridge potentially. So there's a lot of tie-ins to other things going on too. And with that, thank you for the time.
Okay, thank you, Brett. Any other thoughts from the board on this item, new business? So,
No,
go ahead.
that's helpful, Matt, Brett. I do appreciate it. I wasn't quite sure, I've permitted fairly big gravel mines up north and they're I don't think anybody wants a gravel mine in Girdwood any more than they want, some other kind of industrial development. So they're not pretty, they're big. And then, you have to do some when you're done with them. And, hopefully they don't get contaminated during the process. So, I do like the idea of a smaller one that could, we could benefit with, I totally get that the cost of building a house, you need that for its foundation and it'll bring it down. I just wasn't quite sure the scope of this and the jumped out at me. Yeah, so thanks for explaining it to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Guy. Mike.
Yeah, thanks for the previous comments. There's still one piece that's missing for me. I understand that if this resulted in reduced cost for building, then maybe it could result in lower cost housing, but that's a purely supply side argument. There's also a demand aspect to it. And if there's still demand for housing from people who don't live in the community for second homes and short-term rentals, then that's what's driving the price, not just cost. And I still don't see anything yet out of GHEC, which is addressing those issues. So how we actually incentivize the type of development we want, or provide any mechanism to redirect development from, because as we've seen earlier, there is development now. We know there's at least 3 major multifamily developments which have happened and closed this year, and they've resulted in almost no additional, many extra houses for people who don't live in Girdwood, but almost no extra housing for people who do live here. So there is housing being built. It is being supplied to non-residents at a fairly high price. So while that demand is maintained, I see this as, even if it works the way everyone expects it to in terms of reducing costs, it doesn't necessarily do anything to the availability of the type of housing we need. So there are other things obviously that could be done, but this currently lacks that linkage, and I'm not quite convinced yet that this is a high priority task. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike, for highlighting that, looping the conversation together. I don't know who was first, Matt or Brett, but Nat, you're up.
All I'll say is that the construction that's going on in this town is a function of those people that can afford to bring in fill from the Matsu Valley. So and there's no proposals. I haven't seen any for high density workforce housing in the 15 years I've been around, and I'm presuming one reason that is because the return on the investment is not feasible. And one aspect of that is the cost to fill in this town. So, we need to probably change a lot of things. This is just one of many. So you can't think of this in isolation. It's part of a larger picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Brett, and then move on.
Right. So, yeah, thanks. I'd like to just, echo that. Thank you, Matt. Not everything can be done immediately, and some of the desired, say, vertical construction to alleviate workforce housing demand is dependent on that kind of on these kinds of investments, and anything we can do to remove the high cost of both material, labor, say the high cost of regulation, which is quite substantial, given the experiences that commercial development has had in the valley. So it's not that there's one magic wand, and we're going to have to continue to encourage money to flow into the valley. And when people make a development choice and they look at Girdwood and say, boy, the materials are very expensive, maybe I can develop somewhere else for less money and then I can afford it. We're in competition for that type of investment dollar. And the more activity we can get in the valley for construction of residential homes and families living that dream, then the more contractors and construction workers we can put to work locally. So this has actually substantial impact in economic activity in the valley, and more directly on the cost of development of land in the valley. Of course, we have some of the highest costs in the state. So anything we can do to alleviate that cost is going to be a benefit.
Okay, thanks, Brett. All right, I'll move on to number 13, if there's nothing else from the board. This is the next agenda item, LUC 2311-05. GHEC recommendation that LUC consider that land in the south town site is designated for a soccer field, etc. Brett, your name is on this one.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So GHEC has been considering what the most easily developable parcels to address some of these housing needs. And the committee has come up with recommending that we look at rezoning the soccer field near Moose Meadows back to residential, and then allocating in South Town site an appropriate designation for that use, a field use for parks and recreation. And since the municipality owns both parcels, it's something that could be done through the rezoning process. So this topic is up in front of Land Use Committee for discussion to gauge whether or not this would be an acceptable use of that parcel. And it's been through one meeting so far without major objection. There will be another Land Use Committee meeting on this topic to discuss it. And then I would anticipate it would go back through GHEC for a resolution to make this recommendation to GBOS that the municipality pursue this rezoning and redesignate that parcel 6013 near Moose Meadows as residential again. So that's the topic.
Any questions or comments from the board? Guy?
Yeah, I think this is I'm assuming there you have power and water and sewer and everything right there running by the soccer field. So, having that in place as opposed to trying to build in a floodplain that doesn't have it seems to make a lot of sense to me. But if this happened, will this land be designated as some form of affordable housing area, or how does that work? You know, once we've done this land swap, or if it's approved, how do we ensure that whatever is gonna be developed there will be?
Right, great. Yeah, great question, Guy. So what's going on now is it's going through LUC to sort of take the temperature and see if this would be something that's acceptable. And, you know, the intent would be, since this is still municipality owned, we could get into a potential project that we can do some creative things with the land. Since it would still sit under HLB ownership. So there are a couple of different ideas that we're considering in GHEC, and there's some unique financing models that have been used in other communities to put together projects in public-private partnerships to put together some form of workforce housing. There have been some just general concepts and nothing in detail, but this is the first start to finding a parcel that we can deal with. Everything else is very large and requires, you know, re-subdivision, replatting, all kinds of extra things. And the model that, you know, we're discussing and sort of envisioning would be a public land private partnership development with a hybrid financing, but we haven't put together any details or specifics. I think there's some good ideas about what that might look like to be very friendly to the neighborhood and, you know, low impact. But I think the vision is to continue to support trails by having appropriate parking for Moose Meadows, to support the connection of, say, Deb's Way, if we can, back up to the bike path, and to have that type of friendly development for the community, if that's what we can put together. But this, again, getting a site is one of the major challenges, and of course, making that affordable to build is another challenge. So these are the long tent poles, if you will, to try to put something together.
Mike?
Yeah, thanks. As I mentioned in land use, at the time I believed that the two parcels you're discussing, or the soccer field and the parcel next to it, are dedicated parkland, and I've since checked and found the ordinance in 1990 that did dedicate those as parkland. I'm not exactly clear the details of the process to undedicate, but it's not straightforward. And I don't know that, I think, again, the way I read code is it has to be maintained for municipal use. And for municipal purposes, I don't know that it can be disposed of to third parties or to private entities. So there seems to be sort of some baggage, if you like, that comes with these particular parcels, given they're currently dedicated parkland. And I would recommend that perhaps before we go much further down this path, maybe we can get staff to get some clarity on what existing dedicated parkland can be changed to in the future, whether there are restrictions to it, etc. Because again, I haven't got to the bottom of this yet, and it might be more efficient if we can get staff to do that. So that's really a question for Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely appreciate that. And I want to just continue on the thread that this is dedicated public use. And so HLB and its ownership has the ability to do no-cost leases to this long-term, and that is to a public end. So the goal being less than market rate rental availability. So that's
sorry, just to interrupt you, Brett, because that was really a question for Kyle. It's not at all clear that HLB is the right way to send this land anyway. It's currently under it's dedicated park. It's under Parks and Rec, so it's It would
Right.
currently be under service area control. So
Right.
I don't know that
Oh.
we would necessarily want to give it to HLB to see what they choose to do with it.
Service
It might
area.
make more sense to keep it under municipal control that way. But I think the question is, are there encumbrances on this land which would preclude certain types of activity? So would it have to stay municipally owned, for example? And that would change the types of things we could do with it. And there are obviously other parcels which are not dedicated parkland. I believe the one opposite at the end of Verbier House or Verbier area, I don't believe is dedicated. At least I can't find any reference to that. But again, the status of that is a little unclear. And it may be we're pursuing a path that's going to be inherently more restricted. So we just have to look at not only what the land condition is, but also what the flexibility and what encumbrances effectively comes with that land in the future.
Thank you, Mike. Kyle, do you have?
No, I'll work on seeing what it takes to undedicate land and then, use it for development. So I'll find that out.
Thanks, appreciate it.
I would appreciate that as well. Matt?
No, I was just going to simply say whether it would be effectively a zoning change to the MOA that would need to be done to effectively resolve this, and how easy it would be or not so easy to do. That's all.
Okay. Anything else from the board on this item?
Well, thanks for presenting.
Thank you. I missed the last land use, so I'll have to follow up on that discussion.
So we're a few minutes from.
We are, if anyone would like to make a motion to extend right now, you have 2.5 minutes to do so.
I move to extend to 10:30.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Guy. Any objections? You can still try for earlier.
Yeah, 10:30 is gonna be pushing it for me. There's no.
Okay, no objections. It's passed. Where are we?
15.
Next item, thanks. 15, review of GBOS operating rules and procedures and the GHEC operating principles, which are in the packet.
Did we have an item number 14?
We did.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Brooke, I was just skipping things. Agenda item LUC 2311-06, consider possibility of adding GBSA to the bond proposal for public restrooms in Anchorage, with the goal of receiving funding for 3 restrooms, locations to be determined. Is Brooke online?
No, and she's the one who brought it and wanted us to put it on the agenda, but she wasn't able to speak to it at land use either. So basically, there's a proposal by the assembly to purchase these Portland bathrooms, and they would be installed for public use in Anchorage. And the request from Brooke was for Girdwood to be considered in this. It would be an area-wide funded function, and so it was talked about, if it does move forward, then Girdwood should be considered for funding 3 restrooms. From a operation perspective, I got strong concerns about this in the sense that these Portland style bathrooms are fully plumbed and electricity. And so that means they have fresh water and wastewater connections, and then are provided electricity to keep them from freezing, and light in that aspect. I guess they're specifically designed not to become a place that people want to stay in, but just to take care of their business and get out of. Whereas this program has been done in other cities previously, and these public bathrooms have become a big nuisance to manage. If they were to be installed in Girdwood, I think some consideration has to be about the long-term operation and maintenance, and what that would cost the taxpayers of Girdwood to maintain them. Right now we use Rent-A-Can, which has puts little pressure on staff here to maintain, because the contractor maintains them. They may not be the the nicest outhouse, but they do get serviced at least once a week. And then when we have special issues, they'll come out and do special calls on them to fix them and replace them. And so it limits the amount of time staff have to interact with them. Whereas these 3 permanent bathrooms could be requiring a whole new year-round staff person just to maintain them and keep them in suitable shape if we don't have it contracted to maintain there. So there was questions about if this bond proposal also functions for providing long-term maintenance and funding for the maintenance of these units. So I think there's a lot of issues that you would have to work through. The service area should be prepared to deal with if these were taken on.
Thank you, Kyle, for those points. Really, really helpful on the item. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay, Mike?
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure the item as stated makes a great deal of sense because it is area wide. We don't want to have it as a separate bond just for GVSA. My understanding is the bond does contain some maintenance, but I haven't got clarity on how much. And if it is area wide, if the bonding is area wide and the funding is area wide, then it should not be a service area cost and responsibility. I think we'd need to get clarity on that, and I'm sure same with Chugach Eagle River as well, who also have their own Parks and Recs department. So that question, when it actually comes up in front of the assembly, I don't think there's been a public hearing yet, if I remember correctly. So when it comes up in front of the assembly, I'm sure these questions will be answered. But I think at the moment it's very much a concept, and I tend to agree with Kyle's approach of being somewhat cautious and not asking for things we don't necessarily want.
Thank you, Mike. Perhaps we could keep an eye on this item as it moves to the assembly or from before the assembly.
Yeah, I'm recommending perhaps we don't continue this particular item as written.
As written, right? I agree. But the concept I would like to hear more about.
Well, actually, yeah, I mean, this is just new business, right?
Right.
From order. So, and it's been brought through LUC. It's following the proper procedures. So, I'm hesitant to say we don't want to hear about it, especially since we didn't get a chance to hear the presentation. So,
right.
Let's keep it on the agenda for next time.
Maybe let's change the titling.
We'll change the wording or something because of all the 0.3 so far. So
I don't feel like it's been given, yeah, we could change the wording on it, but I think that's a clerical thing.
Yeah.
We don't need to hash
Just
it.
want to make sure we're not saying a GVSA bond.
Right.
That's.
Yeah.
We already need some.
So we're just to clarify, the idea is how would, if this bond passes, how would it operationally function in Girdwood?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Next is 15. And we'll review the GBOS operating procedures, rules and procedures / GHEC operating principles. In the packet is the long version online. And Mike, would you like to start?
Yeah, there's this might be something that I'm not sure if it's good to have it on the agenda now. I'm not sure if there's any activity on the GBOS operating procedures yet. This might be something that's a good exercise or good discussion after we have the discussion training meeting with Foraker. But there is a mismatch between the rules and procedures we currently have in our documentation and what we do in practice. And also there is a difference between our rules and procedure and what's recommended for boards and commissioned across the municipality. So, for example, the old business, new business model is generally deprecated, is not generally followed in most other boards. There's unfinished business and new business, which is done in a different way. We have in our rules and procedures a whole process for public hearings. But in practice, we treat every single meeting and every single item wherever it is on the agenda as a public hearing. And we encourage public input for everything. And that's not true for some of our other boards and commission, some of our subcommittees. So I think these are the sorts of questions we need to kind of wrestle with as a board of both what we do, and while, you know, all these things have kind of advantages and disadvantages. I mean, I personally like having as much public input as possible, but it does slow things down, and having, you know, things appearing at 4 different meetings obviously is also a significant slowdown, and in some ways a disincentive to participation. So I think if we can basically agree as a board, and I think we probably can, on what our kind of goals are for what we do, and how, you know, we operate and how the public operate, how we, you know, engage the public in local government, then I think that's a good start to sort of maybe review our rules and procedures and that of all of our subcommittees. So that's kind of a general statement. This item came out of sort of some big, broader background discussions, but I think it also ties in with the 4-acre meeting.
Thank you, Mike. I think you explained that really well. And I think we would probably agree that there are ways to change operating procedures, attending so many meetings, many of us. Yes, Guy?
Seems like you can always learn that legal opinion about the conflict of interest or whatever that Kyle sent out. It was very eye-opening and kind of, I don't know if you read it through, but you know, it's like, oh, well, you don't actually have to be doing this, or we should be doing it that way. So yeah, I think anytime we revisit this, and you know.
I like that we could keep it as goals, of course, and that's where Margaret had a nice organized list for 2024 and starting as soon as we can, but ways that we could improve. Therefore, a lot of the committees. Any other thoughts on this one?
Just to add one general comment, I think maybe what I'd recommend is we treat this as an opportunity to at least, you know, in our copious spare time, all of us, at least read through the operating rules and procedures and just think about what we individually and hopefully as a board want in terms of our ultimate goals on how meetings are run and how we get, you know, good engagement from the community, and think about how the rules are with that respect, whether they meet that goal or whether they in some ways make that goal harder.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Good encouragement. I think that'd be a great idea. Homework for everyone.
Good.
We all would like to be productive, so we're not here after 10 p.m. Right? Okay, anything else on that one? Thanks again, Mike. And number 16, discuss Girdwood and GBUS collaboration with HLB regarding Girdwood Industrial Park. Anything extra on that, Jennifer?
No, I had clarified with Margaret, this is actually not my bailiwick. I think you might know more about this. Do you have anything about this?
Kyle?
I don't. I mean, we've been working on this forever. And HLB seems to make this a priority. I know they're trying to work through alternatives right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is just a.
Yeah, I recall it from last month anyway.
I mean, well, it's not here.
Okay, we'll go to 17, the new 16 and a half.
So I wasn't fast enough putting my hand up. I did have a quick question on this. Because HLB, I know, have said this is a priority and they're looking at alternative models. I wasn't able to attend the last HLB meeting. I just wondered if anyone was able to, and if this came up in discussion in the director's report or anywhere else.
At the quarterly meeting, I wasn't there, but
Last Thursday.
Oh, last Thursday.
HLBAC.
No, yes.
Yeah, the HLBAC meeting. Sorry, yes.
I don't see any nodding heads, Mike.
It wasn't on
Okay.
the agenda, so if it shouldn't have been a decision. Shouldn't have been a decision.
No, I just wondered if it came up in the director's report or anything.
The
Similar to
director's
stuff.
report,
Yeah, I don't know. No.
We're not
Okay, thanks.
sure there. I just know they have a new member. So.
Actually, there's
but
another.
yes.
There is another member of. There's another member being appointed who was on the agenda at the assembly meeting tomorrow for confirmation.
Information, correct.
Somebody we know.
Girdwood. Okay, so this item though, HLB did ask last month for our position, you know, how we want to be involved. So we'll just keep that question in case we need to follow up with them. Once we figure out if there's any progress in the last 4 weeks. I'll go to number 17 or 16 and a half if there's anything else. Okay, this is the park and ride / started a discussion about the camping overnight, etc. Mike, would you like to start, or
Yeah,
Kyle?
I'll start on this and then Kyle can take over. So just set context, as I think everybody knows, we've had I think, you know, every year we have a number of people in the community who you know, either choose or by circumstances are forced to live in vehicles or live in the woods. And, you know, to some extent, there's a little bit of sort of ski mountain culture, which is always seen that as an acceptable option. Obviously, there's an interaction of lots of things. There's lots of housing pressure and lots of issues around housing cost and availability, which I think is making that less of a voluntary choice and more of an involuntary choice, both within Girdwood and we know within the whole country and definitely within the state. So obviously we have a lot of there's been kind of a semi-established camping in vehicles that and a couple of tents in the park and ride area next to the laundromat, and I think it's understandable why that's an area that people find convenient. And I think there are two things we have to think about here. Firstly is there are other uses for that land. In particular, I think Carl can talk about the value of it for snow storage and for other issues in terms of just managing the winter operations here. And there's probably going to be a requirement to move people from that location. But then the question is where do people go? And so I've been talking to a number of the other entities, non-profits and organizations that have been that work with this community within Girdwood, and sort of trying to think through some of the options. And I think there is an opportunity here to look at some temporary solutions for non-traditional housing or temporary housing between now and when we can actually get more permanent housing in place. So unlike Anchorage, we do not have many abandoned hotel structures which could be converted, or inexpensive hotel structures which could be relatively cheaply converted into housing units. We just don't have that. We don't have spare structures in that way. So we can't choose quick options. We can only do things in terms of changing policies to encourage more affordable workforce housing and to build new things, which is, a 2 or 3 year activity, even if funding were available today. So we have a problem today. We have a problem with temporary housing, with the need for temporary housing today. We will have a problem throughout this winter, throughout next summer, throughout the following winter, the next summer, before absolutely anything could be online that's a more permanent solution. So I wanted to tie these kind of two separate issues together, which are, well, they're not that separate. One issue is we need something in place to deal with a temporary solution for housing over the next 2 to 3 years. And I think we could start that discussion. And then the other thing is what we specifically do with that piece of land. And at that point, I'd like to hand it over to Kyle.
Thank you, Mike.
So, I've directly received a lot of feedback from the community about the concerns of what has developed over there with the camping and the impact that it's having on the area. And for us in snow removal, the park and ride, it does serve a function for snow storage. We have an overflow that's on the backside of the park and ride area that now is being currently blocked by a stationary RV and camper trailer over there. And in the past, we've been able to use the function of snow maintenance and sometimes abandoned vehicles to move vehicles or get people to move. The intention with the signage in town square is that vehicles are supposed to move every 72 hours. And so, in the past, there's been people who have stayed and camped in their RVs and things like that. But if they're in motion and keep moving, it works great for everybody. But now we've turned into a stationary aspect there. Asked for guidance from the municipality, and the issue that we have is that the administration hasn't produced a policies and procedures on how to deal with issues like this. We're under restriction from a district ruling from the federal courts that doesn't allow us to abate camps without proper shelters, having room and availability. And right now the shelters are pretty limited on space. And so abatement of the area is a challenge as well. So we're dealing with issues over there that, I think in the long run, especially from operations and maintenance of streets, could be a big issue for us in the sense that we have RVs blocking drainages that we may have to get into and steam and thaw, or just open up and clear when we get those Chinook warm-ups and different things like that. So I've been actively trying to find a solution to help, alleviate the growing problem over there, but there hasn't been anything feasible yet legally that I can do to make that function. I'm still waiting on some direction from the administration as to what they want to do, because it's a problem as well as they're having in Anchorage too.
Right. Thank you, Kyle, for that explanation. Hope the administration can give you some guidance at all, he said. Anything from you? Okay, Brett, your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks. Super quick question for you, Kyle. So I noticed one of those vehicles has been there since this summer, and then it has been there now since all of the snow. And I just sort of brought to my attention that a person was just storing it there, not living in it, just like parking it. So my question what about the abandoned vehicles that aren't being lived in? Is that a different thing for abatement for you, or is that still? Go ahead.
It is, and we did learn that we can tag those, and if we get no response out of them in the winter, we can do it within 24 hours because it's blocking snow. Anybody who's living in a vehicle is the directive from the municipal authorities that we can't tow those. So we will probably start the process of tagging what are covered vehicles, and if they don't move, then we will proceed with towing those. It's a different issue in itself with towing. Towing companies are really limited right now, but we will proceed with that probably after the Thanksgiving holiday when we can get the enforcement done within 24 hours.
Okay. Thank you. And then we're discussing this in GHEC with regard to the RV area down by Glacier Creek. And it came up anecdotally that initial surveys, and I was shocked at this, related that 100% of the people, folks living in vehicles in that area, are employed. And so I thought that was an interesting tidbit of information. So thank you for your help, Kyle.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks for this subject to bring up the board and Mike for starting this discussion too. Mike, go ahead.
Just a slight nuance on what Brett just said. I think it's an overstatement, I think, to say that everybody is employed. That's definitely not the information I've received. But definitely the majority are. So again, that's kind of a different situation to how I think a lot of people expect the situation to be. But there are kind of multiple different populations that are using sort of vehicle camping across Girdwood, and we've always had that to some extent, but it's definitely more visible and probably more prevalent now than it was in the past. Thanks.
Right. Okay. More homework too. Anything else? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn this meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.